I'm less used to them. I just want to remind everybody that the check is out to the left in the lobby there and the back. With us here from CBC News Thunder Bay, and Lisa moved here from the East Coast and fell in love about 5 or 6 times with many different things, as you'll read in her bio in the program there. So I'm going to turn it over to Lisa to get things started for us, but let's give her a warm welcome, folks. Thank you.
I've been awake longer than any of you here this morning. Fresh from the studio, my day is half over. I'd like to acknowledge that we are on traditional territory, Robinson Superior Treaty, here in Thunder Bay, and original signatories to the declaration many years ago, so we're glad to be able to share that this morning with you. Hi, I'm Lisa from CBC Radio, as Stacey has already indicated. I moved here over 25 years ago, like many people intending to stay for a year or two. It was going to be a pit stop. That pit stop has been extended over the years. I've fallen in love with Thunder Bay. I've fallen in love with the people here. I am truly a northerner now, even though I'm a Newfoundlander at my core. And that's what Thunder Bay has to do. That's the challenge for Thunder Bay today, is to be able to find people who are coming here and ask them to stay here. That's part of what Thunder Bay has to do for its future. We've done some stories over the last couple of years, and you'll be hearing more about these studies this morning, about how our population base is shrinking, how we're becoming an older population, and how we need to expand and draw people here, immigrants and people from all over the world, to somehow come here and make this place home. We have a dedicated pool of people that we can work on right away. We have over 2,000 students here in Thunder Bay, international students attending our colleges and universities. If we can find ways to make them stay, that is one of the most important things I think we can do. I'd like to welcome some special guests here today. So Rebecca Johnson is here, Councillor Rebecca Johnson. Councillor Shelby Chung is also here somewhere, there she is. As well, Wendy Landry, the Mayor of Shunia, is here. Diane Holden from the Immigration Department, as well as Stephanie Harthill. So again, I said that Stacey, when she wrote down those names, all women. That is so nice. All of our special guests today are women. So anyway, so what we're doing here today is going to be expanding on and talking about what makes Thunder Bay a great place to be, but what makes Thunder Bay attractive to newcomers. What can we do to people to get them to stay here, to raise their families here, to buy homes here, to educate their children here, to be able to keep our children here. That's the most important thing that we can do, I think, is to be able to keep our children here and have them good paying jobs in the future. I've heard numbers of anywhere from 30 to 50,000 people. That's what we need to attract here over the next decade or so in order to maintain our population base. And those numbers are daunting, but there is a way of doing it, and I think Thunder Bay is showing that we have made those initial steps. We need to keep on doing that. So that's part of what this next couple of days are going to be about, how we can make it a more welcoming community, what kinds of things we need to put in place. What have we done well? Maybe we can celebrate some of our success stories as well. So that's what our forum is about. So we're going to get things underway shortly. We're going to be talking with rural immigration pilot. We're going to hear more about that from the Honorable Patty Haidu, who's going to be here via video. So that's the forum as it gets underway today. So meanwhile, we'll have a chance to get together and exchange some ideas before the official part gets underway with Patty in about 15 minutes. So thanks very much, everybody, for coming here today. And thank you for being willing to share your expertise and share some notes and be able to work together, to collaborate to make Thunder Bay a better place for all of people around the world. Thank you again.
I completely forgot to even introduce myself, folks, sorry. I'm Stacey Parks, and I'm the one that's been hounding you and sending you many, many emails in preparation for this forum. So, face to the name. Welcome if there's anything that I can do at all. I didn't get any requests for any special accommodations, so please feel free to speak with me, flag me out, with flag me down too, but flag me out. If you have anything that you need or any questions that you may have. We're going to, so our MP, so Minister Hadji, was not able to be with us today. She's down in Ottawa, doing Ottawa business. And so we were able to go to her office last Friday and film some remarks she wanted to address. She was very excited that this was happening here in Thunder Bay, and she's very upset that she couldn't come. So we do have some remarks. We're just trying to pull them up. We may need to ask James for his help pulling up his video.
Immigration is an important conversation that we have to have as Canadians together. It's widely misunderstood across the country. And of course, we have political parties that are using immigration as a way to instill fear in Canadians. That does us all a great disservice. We know that this country was built on immigration, that in fact without newcomers to Canada we can't continue the growth that we've managed to achieve, and that without immigration, in fact, our country just doesn't have the people to sustain itself. Immigrants also create rich cultural diversity across our communities and across our country. And so it rests upon all of us to help Canadians understand that we have different streams of immigration, that Canada's immigration system is organized, that it's actually about ensuring that we have a capacity to help people who are fleeing extremely difficult circumstances, but that we also have economic immigration streams, and that we also work intensively with other countries on ensuring that we have a thriving foreign student population that allows us to continue research in ways that we wouldn't be able to do so otherwise. So I really want to thank all of you. I know that you in this room are committed to having that conversation, and I want to ask you all to join us to fight back against a narrative of fear around immigration. It is incredibly damaging to our country if we allow that narrative to continue unchallenged. Immigration is an important conversation that we have to have as Canadians together. It's widely misunderstood across the country. And of course, we have political parties that are using immigration as a way to instill fear in Canadians. That does us all a great disservice. We know that this country was built on immigration, that in fact without newcomers to Canada we can't continue the growth that we've managed to achieve, and that without immigration, in fact, our country just doesn't have the people to sustain itself. Immigrants also create rich cultural diversity across our communities and across our country. And so it rests upon all of us to help Canadians understand that we have different streams of immigration, that Canada's immigration system is organized, that it's actually about ensuring that we have a capacity to help people who are fleeing extremely difficult circumstances, but that we also have economic immigration streams, and that we also work intensively with other countries on ensuring that we have a thriving foreign student population that allows us to continue research in ways that we wouldn't be able to do so otherwise. So I really want to thank all of you. I know that you in this room are committed to having that conversation, and I want to ask you all to join us to fight back against a narrative of fear around immigration. It is incredibly damaging to our country if we allow that narrative to continue unchallenged.
Live streaming today, so if anyone is not interested, I mean it's shooting from the back, but if anyone has any concerns about that at all, just let me know and we'll arrange a separate spot, okay? But I'm going to turn it back over to Lisa, who's going to introduce Charles.
I've had many conversations with Charles Sirkwell over the years, and like me, he's from the East Coast originally. He came to Thunder Bay and fell in love, and he's here full-time here now. We've talked over the years about the challenges facing Thunder Bay, about the challenges facing Northwestern Ontario. He's with the Northern Policy Institute, which is a think tank here in the city, a nonpartisan think tank. And they take a look at all the different areas of our economy, all the different aspects of our education, and they put together some really thoughtful papers on where we could and should be going in the future. So Charles is up next. If I could welcome Charles Sirkwell here. Thank you very much for coming.
There goes Paul that way.
Hello, I'm Charles Sorpal. Lisa will be happy to know that yet again yesterday I had to do what I now call Atlantic Canada 101. It's a geography lesson about various cities, and yesterday we added the locations of various universities. So while I'm part of the diaspora, I am doing the education exercise about how to get around Atlantic Canada and go and spend some money there, and encourage them to come here and spend some money. I hate leaning forward to the microphone. I guess you can't hear me if I don't otherwise. So they asked me last night to fill in for a few minutes and talk a little bit about the rural immigration pilot, how we got here and where we go. So I put together some slides, which I can't remember what's on them. So you'll have to humor me as I go. And Paula, I guess, is going to push the button, and then I'm going to look like this so I can remember what I said last night, and then I'll tell you what's on the slide. Does that sound fair? So you want to, I guess we better go back to the first one. I'm only going back to the first one because one of my directors is here, and so I better highlight the fact that for those of you who don't know what Northern Policy is, as Lisa was kind enough to highlight, we are an independent think tank. We have offices here in Thunder Bay and in the Northeast in Sault Ste. Marie and Sudbury. We do independent research on all sorts of public policy, from taxation to healthcare to immigration and everything in between. We've done some work on post-secondary infrastructure in the north and how to expand it in a cost-effective way. This immigration file has been a huge one for us. The number one issue facing the north, as I think most of you would appreciate, is the demographic shift and the fact that we've got lots of jobs that are still vacant, going vacant in many of our communities, and so that's why we're here involved in this. You're going to hear from some of my colleagues over the next couple of days about some of the projects that we've got going. We're certainly proud of those projects. We try to take an innovative approach to responding to public policy, so in many cases we're running what we call applied research projects. Applied research projects are where you deliver a program by using research dollars, and at the end of the day you submit a report basically saying, this is what we learned, this is what will or will not work, this is how you might want to look at funding it going forward, and then hopefully other folks will pick up the ball and carry it from there. You'll hear about the Matchmaker project. I'm hoping that one or two of them would be in the room now, but I don't see either one of them yet, so trust me, you'll find some time to chat about it. All right, on to the next slide. So, a lot of excitement over the last number of weeks about an announcement by the federal government around what's called the Rural and Northern Immigration Pilot. I think that it's an important move forward in that, simply put, immigration rules in Canada were not working for rural communities to a large extent. That doesn't necessarily apply in places like Manitoba and in the last couple of years in Atlantic Canada, where they actually created special rules that allow things to happen in rural communities outside of what I call the magnetic force of the big five cities, so places like Vancouver, Calgary, Edmonton, Toronto, Montreal. I think it's important to realize that we didn't get here just because the federal government decided suddenly one day that we needed a northern rural pilot, nor did we get to the pilot that we have based on accidental exercise. There was a lot of cooperation involved. A lot of people in this room were engaged, and I just wanted to kind of highlight the fact that that's how we got to this point, and we got to the program that we have. A lot of cooperation. So I'm going to look over here so I don't forget anybody, and if I forgot anybody on the list, I apologize, and I'll insert it later. But in terms of the last number of years, 1DC, which is the Ontario Northern Economic Development Corporation, so that's the five big cities and their economic development agencies, the CFTCs, local economic development organizations, the Chamber Network, of course, Francophone associations, including two that are housed here, AFLU and Réseau, local immigration partnerships, many of them are represented in the room today, workforce planning boards, colleges, universities, the 7 associations, local community groups and agencies, Northern Policy, of course, Professions North, Common Voice Northwest. I see Ian sitting ominously in the back of the room. But I also want to highlight, and I added this last night after I put the slide together, but I also wanted to highlight the fact that a lot of the input that went into the Rural Northern Pilot and saw it change in a way that actually is going to work a lot better for Northern Ontario was as a result of cooperation between folks who, frankly, in my 30 years in this business, I haven't seen a lot of cooperation from. Our MPs and our MPPs across parties were very eager to support this kind of change, wanted to learn more, and have been open to evidence on all sides. And I think that's a testament to the fact that regardless of their parties, they're kind of finally getting the understanding that we're in a world of in terms of getting our population to a sustainable level and keeping our communities open. And whether they're blue, orange, green, purple, red, or what have you, in terms of color of their signs, they seem to be open to that conversation and finding evidence-based solutions to make it work. The other thing I want to highlight is FedNor and EMDM, the Energy Northern Development Mines. You know, over the course of my career, I've never really been a big fan of regional agencies for lots of various reasons. But I have to say, on this file in particular, they really did what the designers of regional agencies intended them to do, which is hear the voice of the regional input of the communities, and then take the central government, whether it's in Queen's Park or in Ottawa, and actually get some substantive changes. When I was first briefed on what this thing was going to look like, it was significantly different than what it is now, and I think that's testament to the work that the folks in FedNor and EMDM did for us in terms of being our lobbyists to the rest of government. So I wanted to highlight that. Normally I wouldn't put it in a slide, but I felt obligated to do it because they really have had some success. The other thing I want to highlight is we both used evidence. Jobs in demand not being met, it's not an aberration, and the shortage will continue without trying to do something different. And I think this is a critical message. In many cases, when you talk about labor shortages in Canada, particularly in labor shortages outside of major metropolitan areas, people don't believe you. You know, there must be work. There must be locals to take those jobs. And the simple fact is that this program, this pilot, is focused on jobs that are not being filled. And I think that's a good thing. The other thing I'll highlight is we didn't just go with a complaint, we went with a solution. We said you need a regional plan, you need something that makes sense for rural communities, and we ended up with that exercise. I'm for time, by the way. Paul's giving me the evil eye. Well, Paul lives giving me the evil eye, I guess. Next slide. Just in case any of you have never seen a talk that I give, I generally like to pick one or two people out of the audience and make fun of them. Fortunately, Paula's just right here, so it pays off for me. So she's my straight person for the day. There you go. So, in terms of the cooperation and collaboration that led us to here, that's great, and certainly I want to make sure that we move forward and continue that, and I'll give you my dire warnings in the next slide. What this is how do we ensure success? And before you think that this is just a list of random things that I came up with, this is my summary of what that 8-page document that we have to file to IRCC says. These are the things they're looking for us to be able to demonstrate so that we can assure them that we'll have some level of success if we're chosen as one of the places to launch this pilot. And so I'm going to go through the list. They're looking for community characteristics. They want to know, do you have schools, healthcare, housing, libraries, childcare, religious supports, language supports, community and other groups. They want to know if you've got a hockey team that's vibrant. They want to know if you've got a chess club. Do you have a symphony? Is someone coming from outside going to find themselves ostracized, or are they going to be able to go to the coffee shop and meet somebody who knows them by their first name, welcomes them there, maybe buys them a coffee once in a while? That's what they're looking for. They're looking for communities that are welcoming, and they're looking for us to know where our weaknesses are and be prepared to fill those gaps. This isn't just going to be a gift of these people. They're not going to suddenly appear on our doorstep and magically find jobs. It's going to be a lot of work, and they're looking for us to do those kind of things. They're asking about existing attraction and settlement programs, and I'll hit on that a little later. They want to know you have a plan, and they want to see your plan, and your plan can't be 20 years old. They want to know that you've got an economic development plan, a strategy that says, this is what we as a community are planning to do for the next couple of years. They want it to be fresh, they want it to be new, and they want it to be inclusive of the people you're targeting. So in other words, they want you to have already been thinking about bringing newcomers into your communities. The good news is, so far we're doing pretty good. We've got good schools, we've got great healthcare, we've got lots of resources in terms of supporting communities, so we're checking the boxes as we go. They want to know we've got broad-based support, and that just means not just the settlement associations and the economic development associations and 4 or 5 councillors. They want to know that the local school boards are on board. They want to know that the local employers are on board. They want to know that the local media is going to be enthusiastic about it. You're not going to spend the time talking about all the things that newcomers are doing to poison your community. All those things are important. They want to know you have a plan to help underrepresented groups. This is an important matter because I've been on the immigration file now as a policy analyst for probably 25 years, and it's always portrayed as an either-or exercise. You either help the people who are here, or you help the people who are coming, and somehow the two are mutually exclusive, and that's not the case. But it's interesting that we're finally seeing programs on both sides of that divide that say, and you have to make sure that if it's a program for newcomers, you have to make sure that there's supports available for the people who are already there, and vice versa. If you're trying to find and develop programs for people who are already here to get them economically engaged, you can't forget the newcomers and the possibilities that they provide. And I think that's important. I think finally, for the first time in my policy life anyway, we're actually seeing this done as a growing the entire pie, as opposed to I'll take that piece of the cake and you can't have that icing either, and that crumb over there is for me too. And I think that's important, particularly in our communities when we look at the social and economic challenges that the Indigenous communities around us have. It's absolutely critical to ensure that everybody understands this isn't an exclusionary exercise. It's for everybody, and the supports that we build as part of this pilot are going to be able to be used for other challenges in our communities. They want us to have identified labor market needs that are not being met. I can't emphasize that enough. This is not an exercise where the federal government has given us an opening to suddenly fill things that are already being filled. They want us to go after the jobs that we can't fill, the ones that are, well, trucking companies, for example. They've simply given up advertising their jobs. They put signs outside of their operations, but they don't put them in the newspaper anymore. They don't put them in the job banks anymore. Why? Because no one applies. That's the jobs that they want us to go after. That's the jobs that this pilot is designed to go after. It's the jobs that people are posting, and 120, 240, 320 days later, they're still not getting applicants. Those are the ones that they want to put into this program. And they want a commitment by you. They want active support. They want you to do mentoring, networking, welcoming. You know, I was at the strategic plan launch of the CEDC here in Thunder Bay, and I thought Doug did a really great job of looking out at the crowd, looking out at the employers in the crowd and saying, this is what you have to step up and being willing to hire. And I think that's a message that those of us in the room who aren't employers need to kind of emphasize. You can't talk about needing this, that, and the other job, and then when a job applicant comes to you because they've got a name that you can't pronounce, you don't interview them or you don't hire them. So that's not going to be acceptable. How am I doing for time? Excellent. Let's go to the next slide. Stacy, do I have an end time so I can look at that clock and know?
Yeah, so
Because I can talk all day if you want me to.
that's okay. So, yeah.
5 more minutes?
10 minutes.
Oh.
And then we'll do some questions, right?
I'm not taking questions.
Rachel's got so many for you, though.
Yeah, Rachel's not allowed to ask questions. It goes into her performance review. Okay, Rachel's the director of research for Mpi, by the way, just so you know we're making fun of. Oh, and I just gave her a promotion. Sorry. Whatever your actual title is.
Can't take it back.
There you go. So here's some of my cautionary notes that I wanted to highlight, and it's some of the things that I've been hearing in the last couple of weeks as I've gone through the various meetings in Sudbury, in Sioux, in Timmins, in Thunder Bay about this opportunity. It's a pilot, people. It's a pilot. It's not going to solve all of our problems. And it's not huge. We're talking about 2,750 principal applicants divided, not 2,750 principal applicants for Thunder Bay, not 2,750 principal applicants for Northern Ontario or Northwestern Ontario. We're talking about 2,750 applicants divided by 5 provinces and 3 territories. So in essence, we're essentially talking probably pilot communities of a scale of 275, 550, something like that. Our goal here is not to solve our problems. Our goal here is to prove that this approach works and that using this tool, our communities can attract and keep people here who have a successful life, contribute to the economy, support their families. That's the goal. This is not going to solve every issue we've ever had. The other thing I want to point out is, and I've heard this far too often, we start talking about the pilot, we all get excited and we're all fired up, and that's great. But let's not forget the other streams. You know, the simple fact is that if we have a job or a job applicant that fits Professions North program, they should go through the Professions North program. If we have an applicant who fits with a skill category that's already open under the Ontario Nominee program or one of the federal streams, that's where they should go. Just because this is going to be easier doesn't mean we should cherry pick the ones and take them away from those other programs. We should maximize every stream. And that doesn't mean that the resources that we may or may not create either locally, federally, or provincially in support of this pilot can't be used to support those exercises, but we can't use this program to take the place of existing programs. We should use this opportunity to maximize all the streams, because quite frankly, it's a pilot, folks, and we need people from the provincial nominee stream, we need people from the professional nominee stream federally, we need people from the job offer stream, we need the international students, we need them all. This is just one more route to solve the problem. The other thing I want to highlight is, let's not let the problem solve the hook. The simple fact is that the feds have made significant changes in the way that they address immigration over the last number of years, and it has helped Northern Ontario. Many of them are policy changes, many of them are, well, I won't say free, but let's just say relatively cost effective. In other words, we're not talking about billions more dollars in the resource exercise. You can change some of the rules and maximize the capacity or the impact of the resources that are already on the ground. And that's the case we need to make for the Ontario folks. The Ontario nominee program is remarkably narrow when it comes to rural communities that look like ours. They can make policy changes tomorrow that would allow us to bring in lots more people. They could make a regional allocation of the OIMP. They've just had an increase. They've gone from 5,500 to 6,600 or so nominees under the Ontario nominee program. Fine. 3 years ago, GTA took 97% of those 5,500. Let them keep the 5,500. Just give us the 1,100. And heck, we're even prepared to split it. Give 500 of those to us, 500 of those to us, and 600 to the South. I don't care. But the simple fact is that the federal government has demonstrated that policy changes can cost-effectively improve immigration and retention. The Ontario should follow the rule. They should follow that example. They want to find ways to support community growth at a low-cost exercise. This is one way to do it. Oh, and then this is my final cautionary tale for the rest of us. This is like the Atlantic immigration pilot. The challenge for them was to do it well and then grow. Let's not turn around tomorrow and say 275 is not enough, or 30 is not enough. If they only give us 55 allocation, 55 people for a particular tab, fine. It'll be annoying, it'll be disappointing, but if that's what they give us, that's what they give us. Let's make that a success and then go back to them and say, okay, we've got those 55, now we need 155, now we need 5,500, now we need 55,000. The key for us as a community, whether it's regionally or individually, is make a success of whatever we have under this pilot, and then go back and ask for more. Don't ask for more before this is even got off the ground. And I believe this is my last slide. This is the big question. This is the question that's happening at every table, and I suspect that if I went out to all of your individual communities across the north, this is the big question. Is it we, or is it me? And I'll highlight for you what I would answer that question is. And I would answer that question is, we got this pilot in this form because we work together. And I think if we want to make this pilot a success, we have to recognize that the resources in this region are distributed across the region. They're not centrally located in a single community. If you want to have success in Sulaka, if you want to have a success in Kenora, if you want to have a success in Thunder Bay, you need your friends from the other communities. So I would suggest that it should be we, not me. But again, that's your community choices. If you decide to go as a me, not we, I think that'll create challenges for everybody. But that's your choice to make. Because I'm going to highlight this. We argue for a rural and northern pilot. We argue for a rural and northern approach because we say communities are different. We can't now turn around and pretend that, okay, communities are different everywhere except the north. Here they're all the same. And we're going to have one set of rules and it'll be fine. Don't worry about it. That'll just mean that Thunder Bay becomes the next Toronto, or Kenora becomes the next Toronto. Trust me, you don't want to be that, do you? No. So I think that if we're going to go move forward with this, and these are going to be my suggestions for those of you who are sitting around the room designing this program, because someone's going to have to make a bid, and it ain't going to be me. Be flexible, be local, be mutually supportive. Share the wealth. I don't care what criteria it is you use it, but do by population, do it by job demand, do it by demographic needs, but say, okay, if we've got 550 spots, if we've got 275 spots, Thunder Bay should have this percentage, Atikokan should have this percentage, Sulaka should have this percentage, and that's your percentage. And so if it's 3 people for Sulaka, it's 3 people for Sulaka. And don't try to put together a committee in Thunder Bay that says these are the people that Sulaka needs. Let the Sulaka decide that. They know on the ground what the economy looks like and who the employers are, who's hiring and who's not. Let the economic development officer in Ignace make the decision. working with the council to say, these are the jobs that we can't fill here, so these are the ones we're going to use this stream for. That's how Manitoba approached it. They divided it up, they allowed local decision making, and it worked. So let's not presuppose that Toronto did not know anything about us, and we know enough about each other to make that decision. Let's be as flexible as we possibly can. And the last point I'll do is this. Yes, I understand that everybody starts thinking, well, now he's got 5, and she's got 4, and I've got 3, now I don't have 2, and I've got 4 jobs, and I've only got 2 spots, what do I do now? The answer is quite simple. If you can't fill your spots, give them to somebody else. Don't hold them, pour them like gold. Be flexible, be understanding, be responsive. You know, I understand that everybody wants their community to grow, but some years, some communities are going to go faster than others. That's the reality of the economy. And you know what? You scratch their back this year, they'll help you up next. And let's remember that the key goal here is to be as flexible and responsive to local needs as we can, and make this program a success. And the only way you're going to do that is to continue to cooperate with each other, not to start fighting again. And no, that's not a secret message to certain mayors who are running around the newspaper. Okay, yes it is, but that's okay. It wasn't particularly secret because I've said it before and I'll say it again. All right, and I guess on that note, Stacey's going to make me answer questions. Thank you for your time. I wasn't taking
I'm
questions.
really afraid to turn it back on. Should I turn it back on? Should I try it again? Okay, excellent. Technology is great when it works, folks. All right, so we're going to take some questions. It looks like Frank Puglia.
I'm going to give the mic to Frank first. Come on.
Nobody else have their hands up. So, Charles, you have given some examples about where the jobs are needed, like in tracking. But how about the rest of the gaps? And I'm asking that because when we have an immigration forum, we rarely see the employers being represented. So I'm assuming that you have identified those jobs that are needed on behalf of the employers. So there seems to be a gap there. I'm asking because I wanted to make sure that everyone else is doing their part. We're all well represented. How about the employers? Are we going to fill their needs in the best possible way in every city and region? Because if they're not at the table, we're speaking for them. I just wanted to make sure that they are at the table, that we are doing it right. Like you said, it's a pilot. But they need to be, either we have that information, and I don't know, and I think you do, you give some good examples. Can you expand on that part, please?
So I'll take this in a couple of pieces. One, yes, I was pretty vague on, this is working, right?
Yeah, we're good.
So I was pretty vague on what jobs are required and what jobs are going vacant or going unfilled in Northern Ontario and not matched up with various nominee streams. And the principal reason I did that is because I've seen Christina's slides, and so I know that data is in her presentation, so I'm not going to answer that question. I'm not going to steal the thunder from Christina. I'll let her fill in the blanks on the specific jobs that are needed. What I will highlight is yes, the workforce planning boards have done a great job in terms of using the data that's available to us to identify on at least a district level basis where the gaps are. The challenge we have is that many of the gaps are in what's called the gray or the black market in jobs, which is jobs that don't get advertised, or jobs that get posted in the window of the convenience store in Greenstone. So that's a challenge to fill that, and that's why when we talk about being flexible, we have to talk about the local economic development planners, because they know about the gray job market in their communities in a way that Stats can and IRCC never will. So that's highlight number one. Highlight number two is I came to the immigration file from the dark side. I worked for the Chamber of Commerce representing businesses back in, well, never mind how long ago it was. But one of the things that I learned both as an entrepreneur running several small and medium-sized businesses Services and working in the chamber network is we spend a lot of time talking about getting businesses out to events like this or getting businesses involved. And the simple fact is that when you're running a 5 or 10 person shop, you don't have time. And so when NPI, for example, designs some of its applied research projects, whether it's the the project that we did in partnership with Madge, or whether it's the Matchmakers, which is a partnership we've done with the local economic development agency with the chamber, it's all about going to the employers, not waiting for them to come to you. Because they can't. They've got a payroll to make, they've got a shipment to get out, they've got something to design. And that being said, again, that's why I'm a big proponent of making sure this is a locally delivered exercise, because it's the economic development folks, it's the job developers who are going out, having a cup of coffee with the local employer, going into their workshops and seeing where their can and cannot fill, that are going to know the answers to these questions at a local community level. I don't know if any of the, Carol, do you have any thoughts you want to add on that, or just want to nod and say, okay, Charles, we're close enough? Or...
You go first, then me.
No, it's we've been working on it for the last 5-6 years. Charles mentioned working with the chamber and a community matchmaker. I can tell you, the Italian Cultural Center is looking for staff, so there'll be a big supporter, obviously, of the application when we do the rural pilot. Trucking is big. PSWs, I think most communities know. That's something that Charles mentioned earlier. The Ontario government, if they want to improve hallway health care, just put non-code C under the Ontario Provincial Nominee program, you'll solve hallway health care fairly quickly. Confederation College produces a lot of number of students that right now have to do it in a roundabout way to get their PR. They have to go work at a restaurant, become a retail or food supervisor, get their PR, and then become a PSW. Doesn't that sound ridiculous? So those are two main areas, but the service sector is big in terms of trying to find staff. Heavy equipment operators, mechanics, I mean, I can go on and on. But we've been talking to all the big employers in town about Barjay, Resolute, of course, in the 3 communities is short of staff. Mechanics, you just keep going on. Aircraft maintenance engineers, and simple things as cashiers.
And I guarantee you that if Vicki was here from Suluco or Janice from Fort Francis,
that's right. Registered nurses, registered professional nurses, accountants, we need all of them.
Yeah, and I just think I'd like to pick up on what Charles was saying. So one of the things that Paula and I have been doing along with the SEO when we go into the region, so Paula from the RESO and myself as the Northwestern Ontario Let, what we've been doing is we've been going out into the region and trying to engage, do community engagement sessions, because you're absolutely right, Charles. Like a business owner that's got 5 or 6 people doesn't have time. They don't have a lot of time to be able to go and attend an event like this. But going out into the region and pulling community members together, whether that be, in Terrace Bay, for example, we're pulling together principals, we've invited employers, we've had some success with that, but it starts with those small conversations and just building those relationships to be able to inform the RESO and the LIP so that we can bring things together and go back and forth with MPI and hopefully inform policy and then put the action path into place with the selection. So that's one of the things that Paula and I know have been doing for almost a year now, is going out into the region and trying to build those relationships with those employers and find out what their needs are through the people that know them best. Are there any further questions for Charles? Seeing none, Charles is off the hook.
Thanks for
Thank you very much, Charles.
Keep saying on my job, I learn something every day, and already I've learned a lot here this morning. Charles, thank you so much. Good to know that those jobs are out there, and it's good to know that there are people who are willing to walk the extra step to make sure the right people get those jobs. It'll be interesting to see what happens with the coordination after all of this and putting together some sort of working document. Our next speaker is Karim El-Assal. Now, he is a Senior Research Associate and Manager. He's actually with the Conference Board of Canada, oversees their immigration practice. And so he knows lots about this field. This includes managing the National Immigration Center, customizes the research, the annual Canadian Immigration Summit, and the Entrepreneur and Investor Immigration Summit. Now, his research covers a lot of areas, including the economic impact of immigration. I think we're starting to see that here. Immigration selection, how that process works. Settlement, which of course is so important. International students, temporary foreign workers, it's a big file, it's a lot to look at. Intergovernmental relations, business immigration programs. Now, prior to joining the Conference Board of Canada, Karine worked for the Mission of Canada to the European Union, the British Chamber of Commerce in Belgium, and Porter Novelli, Brussels, and the International Service for Human Rights in Switzerland. He's also worked for Immigration, Refugees, and Citizenship Canada and the Immigration and Refugee Board of Canada. He brings a wealth of knowledge. Please welcome Kirill El Asal. He's your next speaker.
So, good morning everyone, and thank you very much for having me to explore with you one of the most seminal issues of our time, and that is how can we attract and retain more immigrants in smaller communities across Canada. Last year marked the 20th anniversary of the Provincial Nominee program, which has had a profoundly positive impact on our country. So, when the PNP launched, essentially 85% of Canada's immigrants went to 85% of Canada's immigrants went to 3 provinces, Ontario, BC, and Quebec. And thanks to the PNP, we have now seen a more equitable distribution of immigrants across our country. And the biggest beneficiaries have been the Prairie provinces and the Atlantic ones to a lesser extent. So we've become better on that front. But one thing that we have yet to unlock is how we can get more immigrants to smaller communities. And it's not just a Northern Ontario challenge, but it's also a challenge that other provinces across, pretty much every province across Canada is grappling with. So I'm going to start off, obviously the focus of my presentation is how we can increase immigration to Thunder Bay more specifically and Northwestern Ontario more broadly. And I'm going to start off basically by underscoring the importance of immigration to this region by looking at the demographic, economic, and fiscal outlook for Thunder Bay. We're then going to better understand what is it exactly that immigrants want and how we can basically embed these features into our community here so that we can segue into some policy suggestions that we'll collectively explore to see how we can increase immigration in this region. So I'm going to start off with a bit of bad news. It shouldn't take too long. We'll then go into some good news, and I promise no fake news. So here we go. So Thunder Bay faces 3 demographic trends which are placing downward pressures on its population size. So we have more workers leaving the city than coming in. We unfortunately have had more deaths than births since 2007. And just to give you an idea of how Thunder Bay fares compared with the rest of the country, so the Conference Board forecasts that nationally we're going to have more deaths than births in 2034. So unfortunately, Thunder Bay is a canary in the coal mine as it's 27 years ahead of the rest of the country in this regard. And we know that we have low levels of immigration, and we'll look at the statistics momentarily. So as a result, you put these 3 negative trends together, it explains why Thunder Bay's population has fallen by some 7,000 people since 2000. Back in 1996, Northwestern Ontario had a population of just under 250,000 people, and it's fallen as of the most recent census in 2016 to around 230,000 individuals. In the Thunder Bay District, the population has fallen from around 157,000 people in 96 to around 147,000 as of 2016. So basically, we have seen population decline in this part of our province at a time when nationally and provincially, our population has grown by just over 1% per year, in large part due to immigration, but also due to positive natural increase, more births than deaths, as well as Ontario benefiting from more people coming into the province than Ontario sends to other parts of Canada. So while we've seen population growth rates of over 1% per year over the 20-year census period that I just alluded to, we have seen population decline in Northwestern Ontario of around 5% and a decline of around 6 to 7% here in Thunder Bay. And so if the negative demographic trends that I spoke to continue, moving forward, what we would see is Thunder Bay, as well as Greater Sudbury, the other Ontario Census metropolitan areas, see their populations decline slightly over the next 20 years, at a time when we expect that other Ontario cities, such as Ottawa, Gatineau, Hamilton, Waterloo, Niagara, etc., will see their populations continue to increase. So in other words, we would see this community, as well as other parts of Northern Ontario, fall behind even further, and this is obviously something we want to avoid at all costs. So here's why population growth is important. Essentially, there's two ways one can grow their economy. You can add more workers, and you can use those workers more productively. And so because we have seen population and labor force growth that has been positive in Canada and Ontario, this has contributed to relatively strong economic growth in recent years of around 2 to 3%. And moving forward, economic growth is going to be around 2%. This is going to be the new normal due to Canada's demographic challenges. Unfortunately, because of the population pressures in Thunder Bay, we have seen relatively weak economic growth of just over 1% in recent years, and moving forward, this is going to be around 1% or lower. And again, this is if demographic trends continue. And so when we look at the consequences of what would happen if these trends were to continue, well, essentially economic growth is important because it's key to at least maintaining our high quality of life here in Thunder Bay and in Ontario, but also in terms of helping to improve it moving forward. And I want to provide you with an example of how population stagnation affects the economy here. So one of the big drivers of economic growth in Canada is the real estate sector, right? When people want to buy homes, there's a lot of construction, and that has spin-off benefits across the economy. Well, because of the population pressures we've had here in Thunder Bay, there has been weak growth in the real estate sector, which has hurt the banking sector, it's hurt insurance, and to a lesser extent construction. So when there's fewer homes being developed, banks are giving out fewer mortgages, insurance companies don't have as many customers, and so this has a negative impact overall. And then you also have to think about other factors. So if you are a business, are you going to invest in a jurisdiction that is growing in size or one that is declining? If I am looking to sell my home, I want to downsize, I want a bigger home, I want to move, who's going to buy it? If I am a retiring business owner, who's going to buy my business? And population stagnation is also going to have a significant fiscal impact. So right now, nationally, we have roughly 3.5 workers per retired individual, and this is going to fall to 2.5 to 1 by 2040 due to our population aging and our low birth rate. Thunder Bay is already behind in this regard. We have roughly 3 workers per retired individual, and this is forecast to fall to 1.6 to 1 by 2040. So what this means is we're going to have fewer workers who are going to be tasked with carrying a larger responsibility in terms of producing goods and services, consuming those goods and services, and paying taxes to help fund the social services that we all cherish. You know, access to public libraries, good education, good health care, etc., etc. So now that I've sucked all the life out of this room, we're gonna move on to more positive discussion. Immigration is going to be a major part of the solution, and we all know this, but it's not a panacea. So if anyone tells you that we need immigrants, they're going to solve everything, you can call them a liar on my behalf. As Charles mentioned, we're going to have to do a number of things, right? We're going to have to tap into underrepresented talent pools in our labor force, such as Indigenous people, workers with disabilities, women, disengaged youth, disengaged Canadians. And we're also going to have to make improvements across our economy. We're going to have to diversify and expand our international trade, which is going to be very important for Thunder Bay with its large manufacturing sector. We're going to have to identify how we can become more productive. We're going to have to make investments into skills development as our economy continues to advance and technology has a disruptive impact on it. But nonetheless, immigration is going to be absolutely key, and here's why. So this chart shows you the different components that affect the size of Thunder Bay's population, and these are all net numbers. So the number of immigrants coming into Thunder Bay subtracted by those leaving, as well as those coming in from the rest of Ontario, those coming in from other provinces, and natural increases, births minus deaths. So the bottom half of this chart exceeds the top half, and the bottom half indicates the attrition within Thunder Bay's population. The top half indicates people coming in. And so this explains why Thunder Bay's population has been falling, and if trends hold, we're going to see our population here decline by an additional 100 people per year over the next 5 years. Immigration, pay close attention, is indicated in the purple shading. So I played around with the numbers just to see what would be within the realm of possibility if we are to have a significant boost in our immigrant population here over the next 5 years. So this shows you what would happen if Thunder Bay was to simply double its immigrant population by now and between now and 2023. Suddenly the top half of the chart exceeds the bottom half, and we're no longer losing 100 people per year, but actually we're adding 100 people to our population per year. And this is just a hint, and we can discuss this in the Q&A session. We're going to need way more immigrants than this, but nonetheless, this goes to show you what's possible if we are able to boost our immigration levels. So for us to boost immigration in Thunder Bay, Northwestern Ontario, we're going to have to address what I refer to as Ontario's immigration challenge. And that is the fact that Ontario welcomes by far the most number of immigrants in our country. So right now, Canada is welcoming over 300,000 immigrants, of whom 40% come to this province. The problem is that 77% of them go to one city, which is the Greater Toronto Area. And so the issue here is that the GTA comprises 45% of Ontario's population and welcomes 77% of its newcomers, which means that 53% of Ontario, or 55% of Ontario, 55% of Ontario welcomes 23% of our newcomers. So in other words, the GTA is the immigration have, and the rest of Ontario is an immigration have-not. So Thunder Bay has welcomed around 220 immigrants in the last few years, and before that, in the decade prior, we welcomed around 150 immigrants annually. So you see the huge disparity. Thunder Bay in 365 days welcomes 220 immigrants. Toronto welcomes 220 immigrants every single day. Don't think this is working anymore. And so skeptic may argue, our provincial government is based in Toronto. Why would they care about this? I mean, Toronto is the economic engine not just for the province, but also for the country. But interestingly, the Ontario government acknowledges this problem, and in concert with the federal government, they actually are working towards identifying solutions. So a couple of years ago, Canada, the federal government in Ontario updated their immigration agreement, and you can Google it. It's called the Canada-Ontario Immigration Agreement. In Annex D, they explicitly state that it is a challenge that 77% of newcomers to this province are going to the GTA. So for us to explore solutions in terms of how we can get more immigrants here, we really have to understand what is it exactly that immigrants want. And why is it exactly that they find the GTA to be so appealing? Well, it's very complicated, but just in the interest of time, immigrants look for three things. They look for jobs, they look for community, and they look for support. So obviously we know about the job prospects in the Greater Toronto Area. I think it makes up around 20% of Canada's economic output in a given year. It's very diversified, and so immigrants are attracted by the fact that there's so many jobs available in a diversity of different sectors. And ideally, as an immigrant, you're not only looking for a job for yourself, but also for your spouse, because anecdotally, you hear that the principal applicant is gainfully employed, their spouse is not, and so, that creates some unhappiness, and perhaps they need to move to another city. The second thing that immigrants look for, and this is extremely important as well, is a sense of community. They're human beings, obviously. They want to feel valued, they want to feel welcomed, and they also want to attach with friends, family, and ethnic groups, right? So whether that ethnic group is people of the same country of origin, the same religion, the same language, what have you. And so when you think about it, the GTA has an immigrant population of 45%. It's one of the most diverse cities on the planet. Every year it welcomes immigrants from some 200 different countries. No matter where you come from around the world, you know you're going to find a community group that you can attach to in that one city. And then the third thing immigrants look for are supports, right? So they need help in terms of help finding a job, improving their English and French proficiency, as well as enrolling their kids in school, opening a bank account, finding a doctor, etc., etc. And we have a great ecosystem within Canada of immigrant serving organizations. So we know that Immigration Canada funds some 500 immigrant serving organizations across the country. 100 of these organizations are in the Greater Toronto Area, right? So all those supports are available to you. So it's basically a perfect place if you're a newcomer, because everything you need is right there. And so what we need to ask ourselves and what we need to do moving forward is to see how we can replicate these conditions here in Thunder Bay as well as in smaller communities across our country. And so we need to really understand what is it exactly that's our value proposition. Because if we don't understand this, how can you expect someone overseas who doesn't know anything about Thunder Bay, to no fault of their own, or another small community, about why they should come here. So we have to really understand why a newcomer may find our community to be more appealing than a place like the Greater Toronto Area. And I submit to you that it is highly desirable for an immigrant to want to come to a place like Thunder Bay, because think about it. It's very affordable to live here. Over the last 10 years, the Greater Toronto Area has seen housing increase 2.5 times. So during the financial crisis, an average home cost you around $350,000. Now a home is going to set you back $800,000, and it's not going to be a very nice place for that, right? And the other thing is, if you're an immigrant coming with a large family, good luck finding something that meets your needs. Let's say you have 3 or 4 kids. You're not going to be able to find something decent in the GTA. And so you can come to a place like Thunder Bay, you're going to find more affordable housing as well as housing that's more appropriate to the size of your family. It's less expensive in general. Even if you're earning a lower salary, you're going to be better off than earning that same salary or more in a place like Toronto. You don't have to deal with traffic. There are job opportunities, as we just heard, and as I'll explore momentarily. It's more communal. People know each other. There's safety. It's good for raising a family. You have post-secondary institutions, so when your kids finish school, they don't have to leave town. And if you're fond of the outdoors, then opportunities abound. And so obviously the key question is now, how can we get them here? So at the Conference Board, we're currently working on a study looking at how we can ensure a more equitable distribution of immigrants across Ontario. We're finalizing it this month. We're going to share it with stakeholders for review and feedback, and then we expect to release it in April. It has a lot of suggestions, and just in the interest of time, I'm going to focus on these 7. So our first suggestion is for Ontario to come up with an action plan to regionalize immigrants. And this is an action plan that would comprise of a table with the 3 levels of government, as well as other important community stakeholders, post-secondary institutions, immigrant serving organizations, the business community, etc., etc. All of them coming up with a shared vision for the future. What is it exactly that we want to achieve, and how can we achieve it? And this may sound like an obvious suggestion, but the challenge that we found in our research is that we have a very devolved approach right now in terms of regionalizing immigrants in our province. Some municipalities are playing a leadership role. They're very active in trying to attract and retain more immigrants. They have immigration strategies. I know that there's a strategy here. And other municipalities don't care about this issue. And they absolutely need to care, because the challenges that I underscored at the outset are going to be impacting cities across this province moving forward. There's no escaping our population aging and the fact that we have one of the world's lowest birth rates. And the other benefit of having an action plan is it would reduce duplication, because what we're finding is, we have a lot of engagement in communities and across the province, and a lot of time we're doing the exact same thing. What would happen if we were to bring our efforts together, share our expertise, and perhaps by working together we can have a larger impact? So, when you bring these stakeholders together, again, they can identify a shared vision for the future, as well as to come up with goals and an action plan in terms of how to operationalize to achieve those goals. So, I throw out some numbers here just to get the discussion going. I'm not married to any of these suggestions. But what if we were to say, well, as a province, we are going to work together to reduce the GTA's share of immigration by 12 percentage points by 2030, to give stakeholders time basically to adapt to the influx of immigrants that are coming in. And this decrease in the GTA's share might not sound like a lot, but the thing is it would result in an increase of 30,000 more immigrants. Or in other words, a doubling of Ontario's immigrant population across the province. Another thing that we can do is nudge each city to come up with an action plan, with a strategy. Because again, we have, outside of the GTA, we have 15 CMAs across Ontario. Some are very engaged. They have municipal strategies, they have LIPs, they're doing other things, they have websites, and we're finding that other cities aren't doing anything at all. And as we heard from Charles, we need more support from the federal government as well as the provincial one in terms of giving places like Thunder Bay policy tools through immigrant selection programs so that we can bring more immigrants to cities such as this one. And so that segues into our second suggestion, which is we need to refine Ontario's immigrant nominee program, because put simply, it isn't working for Northern Ontario. So right now, Ontario has an allocation, as Charles mentioned, of 6,600 principal applicants each year. This data only shows you the immigrants who have landed each year under the nominee program as principal applicants. It doesn't include their spouses as well as their kids. So as we see, it's pretty obvious, almost all of them go to the GTA. 73% as of 2017, which means that the rest of the province doesn't benefit as much. And you see Greater Sudbury, the only Northern Ontario CMA here, welcomes an average of 10 principal applicants under the nominee program each year. Thunder Bay isn't here because I guess, my estimate is that it welcomes around 5 to 10 principal applicants under the nominee program in recent years. Wish we had some music or something. Can you please go ahead too, I think? Yeah, something. And so we need to identify collectively how we can get the nominee program to work for Northern Ontario. Charles stole my thunder earlier by providing some suggestions. I have a few suggestions of my own. What if we were to say, and I guess this is going to be unpopular amongst the business community in Toronto, but nonetheless we have to think as one province in terms of spreading the benefits across Ontario. What if we were to say half of the nominations are going to go to the GTA and the other half are going to be spread across the rest of Ontario? And we could do this gradually so that the GTA doesn't take a hit overnight, right? We can say, okay, we're going to phase this change over a 5-year period, 10-year period if stakeholders agree to that. And then there's other things that we can do. We can perhaps award more points based on an immigrant indicating their desire to go to a place like Thunder Bay. So because we struggle to bring immigrants here, what we can say is, okay, you want to go to Thunder Bay, we're going to give you an extra 100 points. If you want to come to Thunder Bay, we're going to process your application in an expedited fashion, right? To give priority so that we can encourage immigrants to go to places that right now are lagging the rest of the province. We could also come up with new pathways. So for instance, we can come up with a pathway that says, this is only going to exist for people that want to go to Northern Ontario, and we're going to set an allocation of, let's say, 500 spots in a given year. We can come up with a new pathway that is what I refer to as a community and family support stream. It's not a novel concept. It has existed in the past under provincial nominee programs across Canada. Essentially what this is that in addition to assessing an immigrant based on their human capital, their age, their education, their language proficiency, their education, their work experience, etc., what if we also assess them on their social capital? So what if they have community ties, whether it's through country of origin or a religious group or what have you, and these community groups, just like our private sponsorship of refugee programs, say we're going to take the responsibility, we're going to take ownership of doing everything we can once this immigrant comes in to help them find a job and to make sure that them and their family are happy and successful so that they build a life in this city or this community indefinitely. And in fact, it's not a novel concept because the federal government, as we just heard 2 weeks ago, launched its new Rural and Northern Immigration Pilot Program, which is a community-based immigration pathway. And by the way, we provide this suggestion because this program existed across PNPs in Canada for a good 11 years, and it was very prominent in Atlantic Canada. And then under the previous federal government, due to a shifting policy environment, they wanted to move away from it and to focus mostly on the human capital. And they've since come around, right? So there's been a slew of changes that have been made. The most recent one has been the pilot. And it's a fantastic initiative. I mean, I know some aren't going to be happy with it, some are disappointed. You're never going to make everyone happy, but it's a good start. And like Charles said, You start with $27.50, prove your success, and after 5 years, hopefully less time than that, you can go back to the federal government and say, hey, we've proven that this model works, we need more spots so that we can continue to grow our population and our economy. But nonetheless, the good thing about the pilot is that it basically incentivizes collaboration. Community groups have to come together, identify what value each one of them offers, and then they have to come up with a plan in terms of recruiting the immigrants and doing everything they can to support the most important element, which is retention. And so perhaps by coming up with a similar model under Ontario's Immigrant Nominee program through a new pathway, we can encourage even more immigrants to come to Thunder Bay. Next slide, please. So this ties into my previous point about the value proposition. You ask an average prospective immigrant overseas what they know about Canada. They know about maple leaves and beavers and maple syrup. And if you ask, and hockey of course, and the extreme cold, if you ask them about which cities they know of Toronto, they know of Montreal, they know Vancouver, Calgary, maybe Halifax, they don't know anything else, right? And so we have to get the word across to them in terms of, hey, we are Thunder Bay, this is where we're located, this is what we offer. What exactly are you looking for? Or, okay, well, we have all these things here. Where do you want to work? Well, we have these sorts of job opportunities. And we have to figure out a way of being more proactive in our marketing. Because what we have basically across Canada is sometimes we're a bit too passive. We have a website up, a community portal, and how do you expect an average prospective immigrants to come across this website? It's not like they're going to go online and Google the name of a specific city, right? And so we have to go out to them and understand what exactly is their preferred communications medium. Do they prefer social media? Do they like word of mouth? Do we need to ask a newcomer within the community to make some phone calls overseas? Do we need to get the services of immigration consultants and lawyers to go overseas to go on recruitment missions? Where we really have to understand what it is exactly that immigrants are looking for. And one thing that we can do better in this regard is basically understanding the factors of success. So one of the challenges we have right now is we're really operating in the dark, and I'm saying this in terms of what's happening across our province. We have many smaller cities and communities across Ontario that are in a similar position as Thunder Bay that are looking to attract and retain more immigrants, but they don't understand what it is exactly that attracts immigrants to their cities and communities and what's keeping them there. So what if we were to do voluntary surveys with immigrants already in the community, asking them, what drew you here? Was it family? Was it friends? Was there a job offer? Did you stumble across this community randomly? What's your background? What's your age? What's your family situation? Then we can develop a profile, and we can use this information to really tailor our marketing efforts moving forward, because we have a better understanding of what it took to bring the immigrants already in our community here and what has kept them here. And another important element of this exercise is understanding the drivers that result in immigrants leaving a given community. All right, because when you understand these factors, you can become more proactive moving forward in terms of developing an approach to address the challenges that immigrants face that cause them to leave. So for instance, if their spouse couldn't find a job, then moving forward, you would make even greater efforts to make sure that both partners are gainfully employed. Next slide, please. This is another suggestion that has basically been effective if you look at other provinces in Canada that have grown their immigrant populations quickly. And I'm going to speak to this later on, but if you look at the Manitoba model, one of the keys to their success was they tapped into existing diaspora communities. Because again, one of the things immigrants look for is, am I going to find people of the same background so that I feel comfortable and these people are also going to provide me with support? Well, what if we were to start, and this is just an idea I'm throwing out there, what if we were to start by focusing our our efforts to attract more immigrants to Thunder Bay by targeting our new immigrants based on our existing diaspora communities. So we know we have a significant population of Italian immigrants, British immigrants, those from Finland, the States, Poland, as well as in recent years we've attracted more immigrants from India, China, and the Philippines. So what if we were to work with immigrants within Thunder Bay already and to ask them, do you have anyone overseas that is looking to come to Canada and, qualifies under our immigration system? Well, maybe you can help us in terms of going out and recruiting them. Maybe you can make phone calls, maybe you can put them in touch with immigration consultant or lawyer or an employer, and we can facilitate the smoother immigration process to the city. The labor market attachment piece is absolutely critical. So previous surveys, I haven't seen anything recent, but previous surveys of immigrants have asked them, what were the factors that led to you landing in a certain city? 60% of them in the past have said a job. For the community piece, the ethnic networks is usually around 30%. So we need to figure out how we can attach immigrants to the labor market quickly. As we heard earlier this morning, we need to not only think about the higher skilled immigrants, those with the university background in the Knox O's and A's, as well as the skilled trades and the B's, but also in the middle skilled positions. Right, there is a significant need, and so we need more flexibility on the immigration front, both from the federal government, and the rural pilots is more flexible in this regard, as well as the Provincial Nominee program, which has become more flexible over the last few years as well. In terms of enabling immigrants who help to meet needs in areas that our immigration system previously didn't address, such as transportation and hospitality and other middle skilled positions. We have to get the word out to prospective immigrants, again, through our marketing efforts. And really, this is really important, and we heard about this already this morning, is the importance of building employer capacity. The average employer here in Thunder Bay, but also across Canada, is a small and medium-sized enterprise. They have maybe 5 employees. Each employee is wearing 10 different hats. Right? And so you can't really expect them to have an intimate knowledge of the immigration system. And even if they have a dire workforce need, going through the process can be extremely difficult and stressful for them. Right? Going through the paperwork, there's a bit of uncertainty. Maybe you make one mistake and your application gets rejected. You have a need you need to fill tomorrow. And meanwhile, to go through the process might take you between 6 months to 2 years. Right, so this is all extremely challenging. So we really have to work closely with them. We have to build their capacity in terms of helping them, first and foremost, understand the value of hiring immigrants. Again, smaller employers, they might not have the experience, they might not know what immigrants bring to the table, but let's say you're a small company and you do a lot of business overseas. Well, we can convey to an employer that this immigrant, for instance, is multilingual. They speak 4 languages, and by the way, 3 of these languages are applicable for your business in terms of the markets that you're serving. Right? Being as simple as this can really help in terms of getting employers on board. And then, as well as training in terms of intercultural competence and, holding their hand in terms of navigating the immigration system. Right, this is going to be absolutely key for our success moving forward, because you can't expect them to go through all these hoops on their own. They're going to become demoralized, and maybe after sitting down and looking at the application, after an hour they're going to give up and they're going to move on with their life. So they're going to need a bit of nurturing and encouragement. Next slide, please. International students are our friends. They are a great tool, a great source of immigrants. They tick all the boxes in terms of people that can integrate very quickly, economically and socially. As of August 2018, we had 3,500 international students here in Thunder Bay. And so they're already here. And according to national surveys, as well as some regional surveys that we've looked at, around 50% of them want to stay. Obviously, not all of them can stay, because think about it. Across Canada, we now have over 500,000 international students. We have an immigration system that is welcoming just over 300,000 people, right? There's not enough space. Not all the international students are qualified to go through the system, right? So 50% want to stay, not all of them can. But what's stopping us from ensuring that more of them actually do stay, right? There's 3,500 of them already here. And so we really need to think about how we can address the biggest barrier that they face, which is the same barrier that Canadians face when they finish university or college. And that is, I don't have any work experience. Why would an employer want to hire me? Right? And so international students are dealing with this themselves. And unlike a Canadian who has time on their side because they're here indefinitely, an international student is running up against a clock. After they finish school, they get a temporary visa from Immigration Canada for up to 3 years. After those 3 years, if they don't go through the immigration system, they have to go back home, right? So they're under a lot of pressure. So we need to figure out basically how we can better attach them to the labor market by giving them opportunities, and this isn't a zero-sum game with Canadian-born students, but figuring out opportunities in terms of getting them summer placements, placements during winter break, perhaps introducing wage subsidy programs. I'm not a huge fan of them for sustainability reasons, but I think there is some merit to them. Right, these are different approaches that we can utilize in terms of helping international students get their first professional career opportunity, which can make a smoother integration, and hopefully they'll remain within cities like Thunder Bay. And on the point about the labor market attachment piece, there are some good initiatives out there as well. So we're going to hear more about the Northern Policy Institute's Matchmaker program later on in this event. And there's also a great initiative called the Connector program, which I'll speak to in the next slide. So basically, the Connector program was started by Halifax's Economic Development Agency back in 2009. And this is a great initiative in terms of tapping into people who simply want to help. Right, so what it is, the aim of the program is to facilitate labor market attachment. And what it is that community volunteers come forward and they are introduced to immigrants and international students who are looking for a career. So let's say I am a professional in Halifax working in graphic design. I am matched with an international student who's educated in the field who's looking for a job. I provide some mentoring and some guidance to that international student, and perhaps more importantly is I am tasked with introducing them to at least 3 more people that work in the same field. Because as we all know, oftentimes when you want to find a job, who you know is more important than what you know, right? So quickly, the international student or the immigrants network expands, and hopefully over time, they're able to find a job in their field. And so far, the results have been fairly impressive. So over the last 10 years, over 1,000 volunteers have come forward to help over 2,600 immigrants, and over 1,000 jobs have been found. And it began in Halifax. It's since spread to 35 communities across Canada. The only community in Northern Ontario that has it is North Bay, but I understand we're trying to adopt it here in Thunder Bay, so fingers crossed on that front. And if you're interested in learning more, you can visit their website, connectorprogram.ca. Next slide, please. So this is perhaps the most important point for us moving forward. So we know that globally we are experiencing a wave of populism and growing anti-immigrant sentiment. And we've been fairly fortunate in Canada that, for the most part, Canadians are supportive of immigration. For us to be successful moving forward, we're going to have to make every effort possible to preserve this special thing that we have going. And this is ensuring that Canadians are on side with our immigration system. Because as we heard from Charles, oftentimes there's a view that immigration is a zero-sum game. If I'm unemployed and I see that an immigrant family of 4 has moved in right next door, alarm bells are going to start to go off. I'm going to feel more insecure. So we have to tell the story, we have to share information with the community to really help them understand, the demographic, economic, and fiscal situation that the likes of Thunder Bay and other communities are grappling with, and that again, the number one priority is to engage and employ our fellow Canadians, but at the same time doing so isn't going to be enough. And I think a key message is that immigrants are here to support economic development and really to address our high quality of life moving forward. And I want to share with you an example of a recent initiative that I find to be exemplary, and hopefully it's something that can be scaled up across the rest of Canada moving forward. So last spring, the New Brunswick Multicultural Council hosted what they call the New Conversations Tour. They have a website up and they also have a report up, so feel free to Google it. Basically, the impetus for this event is that New Brunswick was the only jurisdiction in Canada to see its population decline between 2011 and 2016. And historically, across the population, it's a very rural province, and so unemployment rate has been higher than the national average, although it's a bit of a misnomer because its large cities have low levels of unemployment. But nonetheless, because it doesn't have a lot of immigrants and it's working very hard to attract more immigrants, there is a bit of concern amongst the public in terms of why we bring them here when we have high levels of unemployment in certain parts of the province. And so they hosted this tour really to get the word out in terms of why the province needs immigrants, to engage with the community, and to identify how stakeholders can work together to achieve their shared immigration objectives. So they went across 15 cities and rural communities in the spring, and basically there were three components of the town hall. So first they had an economist who basically just provided the facts and figures, the demographic, economic, and fiscal overview in terms of why New Brunswick needs immigrants. Then they had storytelling, not only of local immigrants talking about why they came to New Brunswick, what their experience has been like so far, how they feel about living in the province, but also storytelling from local employers. So imagine how compelling it is to have an employer go up there and say, hey, look, I want to remain in this community and I'm struggling to find people. And so this is why I'm looking to bring in immigrants. And this is the results I've had so far. And I've remained in this community and I'm committed to it. Right? This can help to alleviate the economic insecurity that some people may face. And then the third part was they had a Q&A session to engage with the community. They had a few uncomfortable conversations, as you can imagine. But nonetheless, it's very important to have these conversations because it's really good in terms of helping to dispel myths and to build trust amongst the community and allow people to feel more comfortable, to ask questions about things that are of concern to them and hopefully to alleviate. And another important element, like I just said, it brought together stakeholders such as employers, immigrant serving organizations, government, etc. And they had discussions with each other about what they can do better moving forward to increase immigration in the province. So this ties into a few of the other suggestions that I provided. We need to identify how we can harness community goodwill in terms of getting volunteer groups who are going to come forward, play a leadership role, and say, hey, once an immigrant comes in, we're going to match with them, we're going to do everything we can to really help them succeed. The federal government used to run a host program and provided funding to immigrant serving organizations across Canada who would run this initiative. It had some challenges, which I'm sympathetic to, but I think moving forward it could be a model that we could implement in cities like Thunder Bay, but also across Ontario in terms of helping to increase immigration in other communities. And what it could be is something along the lines of the municipal government, maybe the provincial government, having databases of community groups that have come forward. Once an immigrant family of 4 comes in, they are matched with this community group, and again, they do everything they can to really hold newcomers' hands to find work, get their kids into school, help them find a doctor, help them find appropriate housing, etc., etc. Because just like the private sponsorship of refugee model and other community-based initiatives that we've had in Canada historically, these sorts of approaches are very effective in terms of enhancing retention. And if you just look at the statistics, you see that these sorts of models have far higher retention rates than models in which an immigrant arrives on their own. They have to figure things out on their own. so our last suggestion is to learn from good practices across Canada. This is a very challenging area that we're exploring because there isn't a proven model of success within Ontario. So we're going to have to look elsewhere for inspiration. This is my pep talk part of the presentation, and that is that success doesn't happen overnight. Immigration is a snowball effect. You get in what you get out what you put in. You really need to work hard and fall on your face and make mistakes and learn from those mistakes. And hopefully moving forward you end up in a better place than when you first started. If you look at Canada nationally, we were a failure on the immigration front for the early part of our history. We were founded in 1867. Our first few decades we tried very hard to bring in immigrants and our immigration levels were pathetic. And really the necessary conditions for us to boost our immigrant population fell into place in the 1890s up until the First World War. And it was because we worked very hard, we learned from our mistakes, we developed our infrastructure, and we became very strong. And I think Canada has the best immigration system in the world because we're always thinking about how we can become even better. And we can look at recent success stories. We can go to the next slide. In Canada, one of the most prominent ones is Manitoba. Their advancement on immigration has been remarkable, in large part due to the Provincial Nominee program. Winnipeg has grown very quickly due to immigration, but what's most impressive, and I think we can learn a lesson or two in places like Thunder Bay, is the growth in smaller and rural communities in Manitoba. So again, as I said to you, Canada's population grew by around 1% per year over the last few decades. If you look at the population growth rates in smaller towns like Winkler, Steinbach, Morden, etc., they surpass the national average. And so what we can learn in terms of lessons from a place like Manitoba is that you need political leadership. Historically, the Conservatives and the NDP have led the provincial governments in that province, and their immigration positions are almost indistinguishable. There's a consensus. It's a matter of how we can attract and retain more immigrants. So we need that leadership because it's going to be absolutely key in terms of coordinating stakeholders, getting the message out, building public support, as well as helping the business community understand the value of immigrants and providing them with assistance in terms of bringing them here. Tapping into diaspora networks, as we discussed earlier, is very important. So one of the keys to the success of the growth of rural communities in Manitoba is that they tapped into their Mennonite community and basically went out to diaspora networks in Latin America as well as Germany and Russia and brought in a lot of Mennonites, attached them to jobs, and they've stuck around. So that's something that a lot of communities across Canada can learn from. We also have to be innovative and progressive. Don't be afraid to fail, learn from the failures, and move on so that you can become more successful moving forward. So I opened by saying that over the last 20 years we've become better as a nation in terms of regionalizing immigration across the country. Hopefully 20 years from now we'll have unlocked this challenge in terms of getting more immigrants to smaller communities, and we can focus our energies elsewhere. And hopefully Thunder Bay will be one of Canada's next success stories. So thank you for your time, and I'm happy to answer any questions that you have.
Fingers crossed. Okay, questions. We have time for a couple and then I have an announcement to make before we head to the break. So we'll take these two questions, I see. Sean?
Hi, Karen. My name's Sean. I'm from the Local Immigration Partnership in Sault Ste. Marie. And first of all, thanks very much. Really interesting presentation. One thing you said that really struck with me was in terms of looking at why immigrants were attracted to the GTA. Those three components you mentioned, one of them being a community you can go to. I was a bit scared of the feedback. Is that better?
Yeah.
I don't know how much of that I should repeat. Or did you get...
No, I heard up until the
Oh, okay.
yeah.
I know that community piece really resonated with me. I know as a Scotsman living in Sault Ste. Marie, definitely trying to find a pub on a Saturday morning to watch a football game, and it wasn't happening, and I was really depressed, you know. I feel like a foreigner here, so I really resonated with that. But I think for places like the Sioux who don't have those kind of communities, how do you build on those, like, do you know, about best practices? Like for example, would you bring in a whole bunch of, say, Somalis and basically implant a Somali community, for example?
Exactly. Yeah. What's your favorite football club, by the way?
My team is Heart of Midlothian from Edinburgh.
Okay,
That's very good, yeah. Not very good, but...
Okay, yeah, so in terms of best practices, so what you find typically in a situation like that is you really need to develop a critical mass, right? And the critical mass can be as low as 10 people, right? So you focus on what you have, whether it's Scots or Somalis or what have you, try to build on that, and then there's a snowball effect, right? You have to start somewhere. But if you go out and try to recruit from everywhere, you might end up with nothing. Yeah. Yeah, and you tap into the word of mouth networks and the families and friends who work with your local immigrants, ask them to join you. You have family members, you know, maybe your family overseas knows a neighbor or whatever that's looking to immigrate, you know, and through that attachment. Because the reason why people are looking for folks of the same background is it builds comfort. Right? I'm going to a strange land, but these people are the same culture as me. You know, we have the same interests. They can help me navigate my new setting. And then over time, I'm going to land on my feet and be self-sufficient.
Hi, Karen. I'm the immigration advisor from Confederation College. So I'm very appreciate your idea that we should learn from Manitoba, because you know international students who studied in Manitoba, they will give priority when they immigrate to for the Manitoba nomination program. But you know now international students who study in those Ontario, Northwestern Ontario, especially in our Thunder Bay, they don't give any like favorable policy, no priority. So now, what can our community do something to help international students to study here?
You're right, and it's a point that I made as well. So I think we have to understand that international students aren't looking for an education at the end of the day. They're looking for an education to help them find a good job, right? So the likes of Confederation College, I think, I imagine you already do this, but in terms of what you could do moving forward is work with local employers, understand what their needs are, offer programming to international students, tailored to the needs of local employers, and also have job opportunities, placements available to them, so that when the international student finishes, you know, they have a job lined up, and going through the immigration process is going to be more seamless. Because the key issue right now is we have a generalized approach. International student finishes school, they're looking for a job. It's not as many jobs here as a place like Toronto, so they end up leaving, right? And so if we're more practical in our thinking, in terms of, okay, here's what the city is looking for, employment-wise, let's integrate that into the programming that we offer and the experience that we offer to our international students. There's a better chance of fostering retention over the long run. I think the other thing is if we make reforms to the Ontario Immigrant Nominee program, I think we could help to address this issue. So again, if we have a quota and we say that 500 spots are going to go to Northern Ontario, you have a better chance of retaining more of these international students, right? Because they have a higher chance of qualifying versus competing against everyone who wants to go to the Greater Toronto area.
As an immigrant here, I want to ask, say I'm a civil engineer by background, but because of my experience, say I apply to be an immigrant, can I have a job right away as an engineer right now, or I have to go for school? Because that's when I came here, and that's the requirement. You have to go back to school.
Yeah, this has been a challenge that we've had in Canada since the 60s. For regulated professions, it's very difficult, and you do need accreditation, and so it's not a seamless process. But then there's other professions where perhaps you need a bit of safety training, but it's not too onerous. And there's some professions where you don't need any accreditation. So for instance, jobs in technology, right? You can learn coding overseas, you come here and you're going to practice in your field fairly easily. So this is something that we've made a lot of strides on in Canada in recent decades, and there's always very comprehensive efforts that are being made to address this challenge. We still aren't in a healthy place, and I think the key issue goes back to the piece about employer engagement as well as engagement with regulatory bodies. Because employers, the crux of the matter is they don't know how to measure foreign education and foreign experience, and so if I have a Canadian that comes to me with an engineering background, I know what they studied, I know what kind of theoretical background they have and practical experience that they've gained, and I know how that can be applied in my professional setting. But if I'm an engineer coming from the Middle East, they have no idea what kind of background you have, right? And so that's why all these barriers are in place. And so our immigration system has tried basically to knock down these barriers, but again, it comes down to employers being more open in terms of giving immigrants an opportunity.
Can there be a better solution? Say, I'm an engineer, I can work as a engineering aide or just
Yes.
related to engineering.
Yeah, I'm glad you raised that. So one of the things that
That can help.
Yeah, one of the things that we try to do is basically communicate to immigrants. Okay, you studied, you're a doctor overseas. To go through the process here might take you 5, 6, 7 years. You have 3 kids, you can afford it, right? But you could work in another profession that's related. You're not going to be a doctor making $300,000 a year, but you could be making $90,000 a year as a technician or something, right? So communicating to immigrants and okay, there's these barriers in place, but you can still use your skills and talents in a related field and earn a dignified living. I can't hear you.
Right now we are in shortage of PSW, and lots of immigrants are nurses. They are university degree way back home. How come they just have to hire them as PSW? Because they are trained over there pharmaceutically, all the works are the same. It's almost like international, all our books are all international, from nursing to engineering. So maybe that's another solution for.
And it is something that we're doing a better job of. So I don't know if you guys saw the press releases and the news conferences by the federal immigration minister over the last month. They basically committed tens of millions of dollars to what are called pre-arrival services. And what they are is that immigrants overseas, they've qualified for immigration to Canada. You know, typically they need about 6 months to get their house in order overseas before they move here. And during that period, you know, it was a lost opportunity in the past where, you know, they weren't being provided with information about how to integrate into Canada. So now the federal government has made more investments in terms of providing language training to these immigrants who have already qualified, as well as career orientation. So communicating to nurses overseas, okay, this is the process, maybe it's going to be difficult for you. There's a significant need for PSWs, and this is how you can go through the process. Once you land in Thunder Bay, go to this organization, and they're going to help you basically find a job.
Just before I turn it over to Doris, I wanted to mention, that's what this afternoon is about. So in the afternoon after lunch, we've got a couple more sessions before that, but after lunch, what we're going to be doing is doing breakouts where you're going to be, you can self-identify, go into rooms with, you know, people who identify as service providers or employers, be a francophone group. And what we're going to do is exactly that, brainstorm solutions, and then be able to feed those into to myself, Paula, Charles, and so on and so forth. So we have some note takers to capture all those ideas. And turn it over to you.
Hi, my name is Doris Rossi, and I'm here representing the North Superior Workforce Planning Board. I enjoyed your presentation immensely, thank you. What I was going to say is, we know that the population here in Thunder Bay is very heavily populated with retirees. Many of our retirees are professionals that have retired. I'm thinking, why can't we tap into this retiree division to mentor, to piggyback with an immigrant coming? I think that it's a win-win situation. It prevents the dementia with retirees because they're using the gray matter, and it also helps new immigrants. And it's something that's never been mentioned, but I think it's an extremely good idea. We have, it's St. Joseph's Care Group, and I know some people here are employed by that group, but we had, when it was first established by the nun, Sister Lila Greco, who established, she had a vision where she wanted retirees to come to the heritage establishment and a daycare where young kids came, and the retirees would show if they were a carpenter, this young generation, how to do carpentry work. It's something that, again, we don't tap into the abilities of our retirees. My parents were both immigrants that immigrated to this country, and they were sponsored by my uncles who were already here. And so, you know, the process of bringing somebody over was carried on, and I think that we have to look at that as well. We have to educate the immigrants to know the process in bringing others to this country, for whatever it's worth.
You're preaching to the converted. I agree with you wholeheartedly. And I think one of the huge benefits of having retirees and other volunteers in general is that they have extensive networks, right? And the networks are absolutely pivotal to helping foster economic and social integration in the community.
Daniel?
Hi, Karim. My name is Daniel Vadnet with FedNor. Thank you so much. I thought you raised a number of very promising ideas there. I also like when you mentioned that it's important to work together as a region. One thing that I've seen in the previous, 6-8 months is, especially in conjunction with the upcoming rural pilot and other pilot going on, for instance, for Francophone communities, there will be obviously communities that will be selected. There will be others that are not selected. And I would hate to see those who are not selected to feel like they've lost, or, there's no competition here. There shouldn't be seen as a winner or loser. I think that in the long run, and at the same time, we shouldn't wait for these pilots to be completed in 3 or 5 years to say, okay, now we know this works, this doesn't work. We have work to do on an ongoing basis between now and the next 3-5 years and so on. So the efforts should be to help those communities that have been selected to succeed, to do everything we can to make sure that we learn from that and they succeed, but at the same time to continue the work in other areas to promote immigration in the region.
That's a very important point that you raise. It's a very important point that you raise. Maybe as a federal civil servant, that's something that you can influence. I think, nonetheless, it is very important to give dedicated policy tools to smaller communities. And so, yes, I mean, we don't have the luxury of time to wait 3 to 5 years for the rural pilot, but I think that's where reforms the nominee program can help. And I say this because I could be wrong on this point, but if we look at across Canada, I can't think of an example off the top of my head where a small community was able to do it on their own without a dedicated selection pathway. Right? If you look at Manitoba, Saskatchewan, Prince Edward Island, almost 100% of their economic class immigrants come under the nominee program. Right? Without the nominee program, they're going back to extremely low levels of immigration. So I think giving the tools really would help. In terms of other things that the communities can do, I mean, understand what their needs are going out and recruiting, being as proactive as they can. Because if they don't get support, I mean, that's pretty much their only choice. Going out perhaps on recruitment missions overseas and trying to convince immigrants about the benefits of building a life in their community.
Thank you. I disagree with the last speaker's comments to some degrees. I think by nature of the way the system's set up with a point system, it does make us competitors with each other and with other communities. And this, also with the geographical sense, for example, if we're talking about Northern Ontario, and if you're new to Canada and you have a lot of relatives in a lot of people or a lot of programming in the GTA that you can, that resonates with you, and you have a choice between North Bay and Sudbury or Thunder Bay and the Northwest, then the chances of us getting those new Canadians up in our area are probably less likely. So I think with the point system too, and I'm just learning about all of these programs and everything myself as well, but I think that as much as we'd like to support each other, we want to support each other in all of our communities, and we do as Canadians, I think that different aspects of the programs does make us competitive with each other in nature, with the different communities and what we have to offer. I talk to taxi drivers in the GTA all the time. All the time. I have 2 resumes where they've actually followed through and sent me their resumes. And I ask them, why not Northern Ontario? Why not Northwestern Ontario? Number one thing they say is, how many, whether if they're East Indians or whatever culture that cab driver happens to be, how many of people like me do you have? That's the one question they want to know. Then the next question is, it's so cold, how do you survive? Because they honestly believe that we live in igloos. It's like it's a conversation to have, right? But the biggest part is that they have family. I said, why did you pick Toronto? I've met engineers, I've met PhDs, all driving cabs because they haven't been able to get work in the area, but their families are there, their numbers are there. So coming to this so far away from their family is a hard part for us to sell. And even just telling them that it's only a 2-hour plane ride, they're amazed because they know it's up to a 20-hour drive. So I think in that sense, we are kind of competing with the bigger centers and the areas closer to the GTA, which puts us at a disadvantage in this program.
You're right, and that has been recognized by the federal government with this new pilot. And I think that's where Ontario can really help Northern Ontario by coming up with mechanisms so that the nominee program we can have at least a designation of some spots that would be geared only for this part of the province. Right, that way you don't have that competition. And you raise a very good point that I forgot to mention in my presentation, which is that you can tap into newcomer pools in the GTA. That city welcomes over 85,000 immigrants every single year, right? So they're already in the country, they're already in the province. You don't have to deal with navigating the immigration system. And statistically speaking, when the economy is doing very badly, newcomers in the GTA suffer more than any group of newcomers in Canada because there's so many of them coming in and there's only so many jobs available. So for instance, during the 2008 and 9 recession, the newcomer unemployment rate in the GTA was 17%. It was nowhere close to that in the rest of the country, right? So figuring out what their skills profiles are, dispelling these myths about living in igloos and other things, and they think that there isn't much proximity between their family and the GTA and the likes of Thunder Bay. Getting that word across, maybe encouraging them to visit, right? Helping them meet employers. These are things that can really help. And funny thing is, a couple of years ago, I learned about this practice of groups in other parts of Canada going to the GTA to recruit immigrants. I mean, this is something that's pretty common in Atlantic Canada. I found it to be hilarious at first in the sense that they're kind of poaching immigrants from within Canada. But I've learned in the study that we're working on that I alluded to that it is something that happens in Northern Ontario as well. And I think there is a lot of merit to that sort of practice.
Okay, so in the interest of time, I'm so thrilled that there's so many wonderful questions. I think what we'll do is we'll take one more question. It's great that we built in half an hour for a break because that's now dwindled down to 10 minutes if we want to stay on track. So I'm going to take one final question and then make an announcement and then we will have our break, okay? And if there's burning questions, perhaps we can do them when we reconvene after the break quickly before we start.
Thank you. My name is Oliver Price. I'm with the Newcomers Center of Peel in Mississauga and the project, the Rural Employment Initiative. And Karen, you just mentioned that, that many employers can tap into many immigrants in the GTA who are after seeking employment. And we have been operating our project for the past 3 years. And over the last perhaps 5 months, we have had maybe 9 newcomers who have relocated to Thunder Bay, Timmins, and Sudbury, along with their family members. And just for information, not so much of a question, we have been working a lot with several rural communities just to promote different communities through our job fairs, through webinars. And we're working with Piero, with Kathy from the Thunder Bay Multicultural and Economic Development Department, who have highlighted jobs and assisted clients with settlement services when they relocate. And there are a number of these newcomers who are saying, we are willing to go anywhere to work. Our clients have gone to Marathon to take up jobs. Your clients have gone to Moose Factory to take up jobs. So there is great demand, great number of newcomers who want to relocate. I think the biggest challenge we have is connecting them to employers, because they will only relocate to take up jobs that are sustainable, jobs that can really keep them and their families in there. So we're here for the 2 days, and we'll be willing to talk with other employers or community partners as to how we can collaborate to kind of solve some of the challenges we have in terms of those employment gaps.
Well, thank you so much. That certainly spiked a lot of conversation, which is great. I just want to take one moment to thank Kareem. Thank you very much for coming and sharing your time and your expertise and your energy with us. So thank you so much, Kareem. Thank you so much. And one quick announcement right before we go to the break too. I just wanted to highlight that we have the Northwestern Ontario Local Immigration Partnership now has an identity. We have branding, and that's all to the fantastic work of Estefania. So I'm going to embarrass her now. Estefania, if you can just stand up for a moment, please. So Estefania works at Fire Dog Communications here in Thunder Bay, and she did this out of the goodness of her heart. So she has designed our branding and all of the materials that you see here today for the immigration form. So we want to say thank you so much because I think you made it look great. I think it looks great. Do you guys think it looks great? Yeah, thank you. We're going to give her some flowers. And Estefania is actually here. She moved here from Mexico less than a year ago. So anyways, so thank you, Estefania. So we're going to go for a break now. Let's come back at 20 after 11. Does that work for folks? 20 after 11 to hear Christina, okay?
Did you say right? What's up?
all for taking time out of your day to spend some time here. It's so nice to hear the ideas. It's so nice to hear people exchanging ideas, coming up with ways to attract people to what we know is the best part of the world, Northwestern Ontario. So I've learned a lot already this morning, and I continue to be learning throughout the rest of the morning. There's been some great research, some great storytelling. The next guest we have coming up here right now, Charles alluded to her a little earlier, Charles Sirtwell from the Northern Policy Institute. It's one of his colleagues at the Institute, Christina Zeppi. She is a former research analyst with NPI, but she's taken a look, her particular passion this time around is taking a look at immigration reform and policy. She also takes a look at that through Indigenous affairs. She works with the environment, mental health. She also has worked as a financial advisor to TD at TD Canada Trust. So she has a rich and varied background as well, as we all do, who make our lives here in the North. So if we could please welcome Christina Zeppi to come up and present the next round for this morning. Thank you, Christina.
And I should mention, I just got a good question from Danielle. The presentations will be shared. So just so folks know, some people are taking photos, I do that anyways, but yes, the presentations will be shared probably Friday.
Hi everyone, so my name is Christina Zeppi and I'm here to talk about the Northern Attraction series. So just a little background about this series. So I was employed by Northern Policy Institute in 2017 to come up with a Northern Attraction strategy for Northern Ontario. So the project is twofold. First is policy suggestions that can be implemented at the federal and provincial level, and the other part of the project is what municipalities can do and strategies that they can take to increase their newcomer attraction and retention efforts. So the series, the results of my project are in 4 reports. As some of you may have read the first one, it came out about 2 months ago. If not, I encourage you to read it. It's on the Northern Policy Institute's website. And the other reports, the 2nd, 3rd, and 4th, are going to be coming out in the next few weeks or month or so keep an eye out for those. The strategies that I'm going to be presenting today are just a very, very select few of what the actual reports cover. I tried to pick something for everybody in the room today, so hopefully something on the screen resonates with everyone in here. And again, so just keep a lookout for the series if you want more strategies, more research, more findings, more data, and more background. So for the agenda today, I'm just going to go over very briefly what NPI is, since Charles did a really good job at that at the very beginning. I'm also going to go over why we need a Northern Newcomer strategy, and then I'm going to dive right into the research results and then conclude the presentation. So what is NPI? So NPI is an independent think tank, and we conduct evidence-based policy options for Northern Ontario, and we're based in the North. So a few important takeaways from there. We are independent. We're nonpartisan, so we don't take sides. We are evidence-based, so we allow the data and the research to drive our results. And we are for the North, so we're in the North and for the North. So why do we need a Northern Newcomer strategy? So this graph right over here shows the cumulative population growth from 1996 to 2016 for Northeastern Ontario. Out of the 8 districts in Northeastern Ontario, only 2 have experienced population growth from 1996, so Manitoulin and Parry Sound have done quite well, while the other districts in Northeastern Ontario have experienced a population decline. The top line over there you'll see is Ontario's population growth, the province as a whole. So while Northeastern Ontario has experienced some decline, the province of Ontario has been growing at a steady rate of 25.1%. And we see a similar trend in Northwestern Ontario as well. So out of the 3 districts in Northwestern Ontario, Kenora has grown while the other 2 have experienced a population decline. And again, the province as a whole has grown at 25.1%. So the population in Northern Ontario is declining. That's the first reason we need a Northern Newcomer strategy. The second reason we need a Northern Newcomer strategy is something called the dependency ratio, the demographic dependency ratio. So this measures the amount of working people per dependents in a community. So in economically sustainable communities, the ideal DDR is 2 workers per 1 dependent. Dependents are people under the age of 15 or over the age of 65. So we can see here, from 1996, 2016, and 2036, many of the northern districts will experience an inverse relationship where there are 2 dependents per 1 working person. And this tells us a few things. First and foremost, it tells us that our population is aging. The way that we calculate this, this ratio does take into consideration, as I said, the people aged over 65. So it is telling us that our population is aging. This measurement also takes into consideration, also assumes full labor participation of those aged 15 and 64, which we know is not always the case. So this assumes that everybody, Indigenous and non-Indigenous in Northern Ontario in these districts, is working. And even still, with 100% labor force participation, the DDR in these regions will not be able to sustain the quality of life that we enjoy right now. And just to give you kind of an idea of the demographic makeup of the population, when we look at Thunder Bay's population as of 2016, 20% of those in Thunder Bay are 65 and over. In 2036, this is going to go up to 30%. So the population, again, as I said, is aging. In order to currently maintain in Northwestern Ontario the current DDR that we have, we need about 2,300 newcomers annually. And this is just to maintain where we are right now. If we would like to grow at the rate of which the province has grown, we need about 356 annually, just to put it into perspective for all of Northwestern Ontario. So the DDR is another reason why we need a Northern Newcomer strategy. So what are the implications of a declining, stagnant population? So I'm not going to go into too much detail just because Kareem did a really great job of explaining this, but the population in Northern Ontario is declining. The labor force is expected to decline and the DDR is going to increase. So what are some of these socioeconomic effects? Well, this is going to affect consumption, savings, and also investment. A lower tax base, which will affect the delivery of necessary services. And finally, a decrease in productivity and a skills shortage will occur as retirees retire. This is also really concerning for the business community because if there's a skills shortage and they're not able to fill those skills, then they might be forced to move elsewhere where they can find people to complete the work. And so why do we specifically need a northern strategy? Well, Ontario attracts the most amount of immigrants in the country. From 2011 and 2016, Ontario attracted 472,000 immigrants. Of those immigrants, only 0.7% came to Northern Ontario. To put that into a number, that's 3,305. So right over here we have the chart of each district in Northern Ontario and the amount of immigrants that they welcomed over a 5-year period. And if we take a look at these 4 districts in Southern Ontario, I chose these 4 districts because they do have a high concentration of immigrants. If we take a look at these 4 districts, it accounted for nearly 77% of all immigrants. So Northern Ontario needs some sort of policy or tool or strategy in order to boost their immigrant efforts, as well as be able to attract these people that are coming into our province. Okay, so right now I'm going to go talking about the research results. So I just want to mention that in order to come up with these results, I conducted a multitude of stakeholder consultations. I see some of you in the room today. I spoke to local immigration partnerships, settlements serving agencies in Northern Ontario as well as Southern Ontario. I interacted with the business community, economic development officers, post-secondary institutions, bridge training programs, the different levels of governments. I participated in a number of meetings. I went to a number of conferences. So many of the results that I conducted are a result of these interactions. And as I said, these are just some of the results that I have come up with that I'm going to be presenting to you today. And when I use the word newcomer, I just want to reiterate that newcomer is basically anyone new to the community. So we have been focusing a lot on immigrants today, and immigrants are usually the topic of discussion when we talk about newcomers because they don't have many ties anywhere else in Canada, so they're starting off with a fresh start. But when I say the word newcomer, I want you guys to keep in mind that I'm also talking about people in the GTA or other provinces or from Sudbury to Thunder Bay or vice versa. So one of the first results that I want to talk to you about is that key players express a shared interest in a more collaborative and regional approach to newcomer attraction. a lot of the challenges that when I was, conducting my stakeholder consultations and speaking to community members, I would ask, what are some of the challenges to newcomer attraction and retention in Northern Ontario? And some of the things that came up is that the region is just too big and people have a hard time moving in a sort of rhythm that collaborates with one another. There's also a lot of silos and program duplications, and unfortunately, instead of doing the lessons learned where people learn from mistakes made in the past and seeing what you can do better in the future, people are constantly making these same mistakes, so it's very redundant and it's not efficient. So having a regional approach to newcomer attraction will assist the region in a few ways. So we can share resources. Small communities, we hear all the time that there's a lack of funding or a lack of resources to be able to participate in newcomer attraction and retention efforts. So by coming together and having a regional approach, you can share resources and have more success. And when I was conducting my research, I was looking for an example of communities similar to Northern Ontario that had a regional approach in place, which were really successful in immigration. So I came across 7 communities in Manitoba. So this was a report put out by the Rural Development Institute by Lori Block in 2010. So those towns in Manitoba that you see listed there's 7 towns. 7 community leaders from the 7 towns in Manitoba came together because they saw immigration as a way to revitalize the communities that were declining, aging, and populations that were stagnant. So part of the community leaders are some of the economic development officers, community development corporations, city councilors, as well as Manitoba's version of OMAFRA. And they also interacted with other community players, so they interacted with post-secondary institutions, the education sector, different religious organizations, and settlement service agencies, and city councilors, and so on. And one of the things that in creating this regional approach, as I'm sure many of you can resonate with, is that there were different challenges. Each community has its own challenge. So for example, the towns of Virden and Pipestone were expecting rapid growth for the next 10 to 15 years because of an oil boom in their community. So they were looking to grow quite rapidly. Whereas the town of Boissevain, they had to fill 200 jobs immediately within their communities, but they lacked the infrastructure to welcome newcomers. So they didn't have the housing or the transportation in place, as well as business opportunities perhaps for maybe spouses and things like that. So these were some identified challenges that these 7 towns identified prior to carrying out their regional strategy. But in order to overcome these challenges and barriers, they had a very, very specific outline of their plan and their goals and what each community was in charge of and how they were going to help each other achieve their goals. So based on their regional approach, they came up with 6 steps that I wanted to share with you today. So the first is to prepare for newcomers. There's nothing worse than welcoming people to your community and not having the settlement services in place for them to succeed. So where are these people going to stay? How are they going to get around? Where are their children going to go to school? What bank are they going to sign up for? Etc., etc. The second step was to raise awareness in the community about any initiative to bring newcomers, and this is to increase knowledge sharing and support. As Corinne mentioned before, it's extremely important to involve your community to dispel any sort of myths about newcomers and to gain support. The more support you gain from your community, the easier it's going to be for these newcomers to integrate into the host community. The third step was to disseminate information through population growth strategies such as recruitment and marketing. So here they did some research to see exactly where their target populations were, how they could reach them, what they could do to grow their populations, and exactly how to market, what the strengths of their communities were and how to market their strengths. The fourth step was to tap into existing populations of immigrants and create a lessons learned. So tapping into that existing population, finding out what did we do well when you first came into this community, what could we have done better, etc. The fifth one is to assess the population growth strategies to find out what is working, what is not. This is so important. You want to make sure that you're not wasting time and resources into something that's not working. What steps could you eliminate? Where could you add steps? What could you maybe join together? And the sixth one is to involve the business community. One of the aims of bringing in newcomers or immigrants to a community is to fill economic needs. So if we're filling economic needs, we have to involve the business community to ensure that any sort of gaps or challenges that they are having with integrating newcomers is being addressed. So, for example, I sat in on a meeting with a settlement service provider where they invited the Chambers of Commerce to their meeting, and the Chambers of Commerce representative said, you know, we have all these newcomers coming into these small, medium enterprises, but there's no onboarding, and the owners just don't have the time or the capacity to do the HR onboarding that's required for these newcomers to succeed. So simple things like turning on the computer or finding out, you know, where this is or where that is, or knowing where the bathroom is, or knowing how to open up an email, or just things like that. The businesses were saying we're just too busy. We don't have the time to sit there for an hour or two and, you know, onboard these newcomers. So the settlement service providers and the Chambers of Commerce, they came up with a strategy where perhaps they could maybe, provide them with an employee that would help with the onboarding on the first day or the first week, and then the second week it would be more of a phone call or a meeting, and then, you know, it would get less and less, but just to provide that support to the businesses. So involving the business community is crucial to success. So how did these communities do? Well, unfortunately, into the study, the report that was done in 2010 hasn't published a follow-up, but I went online on Statistics Canada to track the immigration numbers, so seeing how much these communities welcomed from 2006 to 2010, and then from 2011 to 2016, just to see if there was any sort of spike or increase. And here we see that some communities did do exceptionally well. So again, these are small communities, you can see the size of them. So the first community, I'm not sure how to say it, I think it's Melita. So their population in 2016, you can see, was 1,042, and their immigration numbers doubled in 2 years, in the 10 years time span. And I think that's a lot of people to be welcoming for a community of that size. 45 people decided to go there, so that's quite a bit. As well as, you know, when we're looking at the other communities, the town of Surrey Glenwood, they had 0 immigrants from the first time period. And then in the next time period, from 2001 to 2006, they welcomed 45 people. So it would be really beneficial if the Rural Development Institute published a report of lessons learned, or perhaps maybe communities in Northern Ontario could reach out to these communities to find out exactly what they did and how come they were successful. So another research result that I wanted to speak about today regards the Ontario Immigrant Nominee Program. So I'm not sure if everybody in the room knows exactly what that is, but in case you don't, it is an expedited immigration program created to help Ontario fill economic needs. So usually the process takes about 6 months. People are approved, get their PR, and they can come and settle into a community. It's really fast. And there, as Kareem had mentioned, there are certain allocation limits to each province, Ontario having 6,600. So in consulting with stakeholders and really looking at the numbers and looking at the program, it was revealed that the current OINP does not fill the needs for Northern Ontario's social and economic needs. So one thing that I really want to emphasize is the economic challenges. So there's 3 streams under the OINP, and each stream has an individual category, and each category has its own requirements of how you qualify. For example, having experience in a specific job, having been in that job for 2 consecutive years, having a certain level of education, and there's different ways to score points, of course, based on age, etc., etc. So one of the streams that really struck me was the in-demand stream. So the in-demand list stream is supposed to fill jobs that are in demand in the province. As Kareem had mentioned, the one in Ontario just got piloted, I think it was 3 years ago. So they're just testing it out. But Manitoba and Saskatchewan also have an in-demand job list. So when we compare the 3, the results are quite striking. So when you look at Manitoba's, they have 134 jobs on their list. And the knock codes that I have listed there, 0A and B are the high-skill knock codes. So they have 134 jobs on their list in those knock codes listed, and that list is updated every year. You can go on the Manitoba website and find out what their list was last year, the year before, and those labor market studies are available to the public, so people can see exactly how they come up with these numbers. Saskatchewan doesn't have as many as Manitoba, but they have 33 jobs on the list. And they also provide labor market impact study and labor market study, on their websites, and to just so that you can understand exactly how they came up with those occupations and what they were the year before and so on. Ontario has 7 jobs on their in-demand list. And so the jobs are in skill types C and D, but again, it's only 7 jobs. And it is a pilot, so I am a bit sympathetic, of course, with the progression of it. But so it would be interesting to know once the pilot is done exactly what the results were from it and to see where they could improve. But yeah, so if we go on to the next slide. The data team at Northern Policy Institute conducted a study to see exactly what jobs were in demand in Northeastern Ontario as well as Northwestern Ontario. So here's a list based on search tools. So for example, the City Jobs or Canada, the federal government websites, job postings, and just looking to see exactly how many jobs were available. So based on the study done, 5 out of 10 jobs based on vacancies, 7 out of 10 jobs based on longest average posting, and number of postings were not covered by the OINP. So this is for Northwestern Ontario. And we see a similar trend in Northeastern Ontario. So 7 out of 10 jobs based on vacancies and number of postings, and 6 out of 10 jobs based on longest average number of posting was not covered under the OINP. So one of the suggestions in my policy paper is to increase this in-demands list and make it much more comprehensive so that it can really focus on the needs of every individual community, especially because the OINP was created to fill economic needs. Another research result that I came across when talking to stakeholders is that in order to break down employment barriers for immigrants and international students, small to medium enterprises, they need more support. So there are 2 options that I have come up with. The first one is to dedicate 2 to 4 federal or provincial employees to run workshops or meetings for employers to assist them with the OINP application. The OINP application for employers can be very onerous, as Corinne had mentioned. So it can take extremely long. They can make one mistake. They don't get their application rejected, and then they tell another business owner, don't bother with that program. I tried to do it. It took so long. I just got declined, and it's just this really lengthy process. So by dedicating a couple of employees to employers, you're really helping them in that process. Another option is to train the trainers. So perhaps training people within local chambers of commerce, community volunteers, or economic development officers to then go and hold workshops for employers so they can easily navigate through the OINP system so that we can use it. So Corinne talked about the National Connector Program, so I just want to see if I can show you guys a video about it that they have on their website so you guys can understand exactly what they're doing. So both Emily and I are not tech savvy enough to figure out how to put the video up on there. Sorry guys. It basically is just going to echo what Corinne had said. So the National Connector Program is meant to break down those barriers and challenges that newcomers and international students have when they are entering the job market. I know that Corinne spoke on some of the challenges that international students face with the time constraint that they have. But it's similar to immigrants that come here. They don't have maybe these Canadian job experience, employers are not recognizing their credentials, they're having a hard time getting an interview, and so on. So the National Connector Program is meant to connect employers and immigrants as well as international students and then expand and broaden their network. And I know that Paul is working really hard to get this program in Thunder Bay, so hopefully that goes through and Thunder Bay sees some results from that. Another research result that I wanted to talk to you guys about today is the need for Northern Ontario to actively and aggressively market opportunities here in these communities. So some of the things that I heard from stakeholders over and over again was that Northern Ontario doesn't do a very good job at marketing themselves. And I mean, this goes true for a lot of things. For example, I came to Sudbury to work for Northern Policy Institute. I was up here for a year, and I was, talking to my friends when I had gone back from the GTA. I went back to Toronto to speak with my friends and hang out with them and whatever. And I'm telling them, it was August, so nice, beautiful summer. And yeah, in Sudbury, things are great. And everyone's like, do you have a summer there? Yeah, we've got a summer. It's really hot. It might be hotter some days in Sudbury than it is in Toronto. And these are Canadian-born kids. Like, these aren't immigrants. These are kids who are born and raised in Canton, in Mississauga, and Toronto, and they have no idea. And Sudbury's not even, it's not that far. I thought, people knew about Sudbury, but no, apparently not. So these kinds of things, dispelling these myths. Yes, we do have a summer. There's tons of things to do, and not just. And one thing that I heard a lot in my stakeholder discussions was that Northern Ontario focuses too much on outdoors living as well as nature, which is great. Of course, there is a market for that, and that is something absolutely to market because it's one of the beautiful things about the region. However, there has to be a bit more. People need to know that when they're coming here, do they have, my mother, I'm embarrassed to say, but she's my mother and sweet and I love her, but she's like, do you have a grocery store in Sudbury? Yeah, Mom, of course we have grocery. Do you have a gym? Yeah, we have gyms. We have everything. There's a mall here, and I can order clothes and online shopping, and I can do tons. So these kinds of myths, dispelling these myths, because people believe we don't have these services up here, and there's tons to offer. So one of the things that I wanted to talk about is this graph right here. So this graph right here shows the share of individuals in certain income brackets based on their education level. This is university level. So, and it compares Toronto, Ottawa, York, Peel, the Northeast, and the Northwest. So just looking at, I'm just going to go at the very bottom income bracket just for the sake of explaining it easier. So we can see from the 50,000 to the 59,000 income bracket, 30 of those people earning that money in the Northwest, 38% of them hold a university degree, and so forth. So we can see as it goes up higher in the income brackets. I'm sorry guys, this is for non-university. This is the chart I'm talking about. So this is for university level education, pardon me, sorry. So at the very bottom income bracket, 40% of those people earning that income, 41% of those in the Northwest hold a university level education. And as you go up higher in the income bracket, we see that in Toronto, Ottawa, York, and Peel, there's a higher representative of those with a university level education in a higher income bracket, which is maybe something you might expect, right? If we go to the next graph, so this is the share of individuals with a non-university certificate or diploma. So maybe something like an apprenticeship certification or a trade certification or a college diploma. And here, this was quite interesting for me to find out as a researcher, and hopefully you guys share my enthusiasm. So when we go up to the higher income brackets, we see that in the Northeast and the Northwest, there is a higher percentage of individuals in those higher income brackets that don't have a university level education. So in Northern Ontario, the data shows that there is more opportunity to make more money in these brackets. You don't have to have a university level education. Now this is something that we should be marketing to college students. More research needs to be done, of course, to understand exactly where these programs, what programs can lead to these jobs. But again, we should be marketing these opportunities not just to colleges in Northern Ontario, but also in Southern Ontario and across the country. You never know what kind of disheartened student you're going to touch that day. They're coming out of their program and they're thinking, how am I going to afford living here in the GTA? What kind of job am I going to get? No one's ever leaving their job. This entry-level job requires 5 to 7 years of experience. And that's all that it takes, is being able to touch a few of those students and having them come up here and explore the region and see what kind of opportunities there are available. So this is kind of an example of what I'm saying about when you need to aggressively market the strengths in Northern Ontario. Another interesting piece of data that I wanted to share with you today is that the share of owner households spending 30% or more of their income on shelter costs. So these are people that own their houses, and shelter costs includes things like mortgages, property tax payments, food, and so on. So we can see that when we're looking at the 11 northern districts compared to the, well, specifically York, Toronto, and Peel, where the population is highly concentrated, in some cases, less than half the people in Northern Ontario spend 30% or more of their income on shelter costs. And this is something that we can market to young families. As a young person myself, I have no idea how I'm going to buy a house in the GTA. After living in Sudbury, I told my boyfriend that we should, consider moving up to Northern Ontario. It's absolutely beautiful. The housing prices are reasonable. My commute to work was 7 minutes long. There's so many benefits to coming up to Northern Ontario, and so these are some of the things that I think that we should be marketing in addition to the outdoor living and the nature that we have to offer. And I know that there is an example right now with the Community Matchmaker program. I know that they have created postcards and they are marketing these kinds of statistics and seeing how that works. So it'll be really interesting to see what the results of this marketing is. Okay, so just to conclude the presentation today, so again, as I mentioned, these strategies are meant to add to the great work that's already going on in the region. As I speak to different community members and stakeholders, there's already so much that's been trying to happen on the ground to increase those immigration numbers as well as welcome newcomers from other parts of the province and the country. So I just wanted to mention a few of the efforts. So we have the Northwestern Immigration Portal. I know that they just added their Talk to Chat function, which I've heard has been super successful. They get inquiries all the time from all over the country. Every day, I think I heard that they were extremely busy. They didn't have the capacity to staff it at first because it was just so busy. The demand was so high. So that's something that has been really great. I know that the TBMA, Thunder Bay Multicultural Association, introduced online language classes, both settlement services. I'm not exactly when they introduced it, but I think it was 5 years ago. And I was speaking to one of the employees there, and she told me that they've been able to increase their number of clients in the hundreds just by, giving these services. In the past, sometimes newcomers had to wait a year just to have their initial settlements done, and that's just not okay. You can't ask them to come to the community and not be able to provide them with those services because they have to live their life and move on. So something as easy as online classes has really increased that service. I know that the post-secondary institutions have been doing a ton of work in the region to recruit international students. As Kareem mentioned, international students are an absolute gold mine for newcomers just because the post-secondary institutions do a ton of the heavy lifting and the work to bring them here and to attract those newcomers. So I know that the PSIs have been doing quite a bit of work for that. I know that the CEDC has participated in some international recruitment fairs. And of course, there have been communities that have been focusing on secondary migration. And finally, in the last few months, we know, I'm not sure if everybody knows, but the federal government announced the official languages plan to enhance Francophone minority communities through immigration. So giving more money to those settlement services and increasing those service providers in order to welcome our Francophone community. And so what are some of the next steps for the region? So Charles spent quite a bit of time talking about this, so I'm not going to delve too much into it, but the Rural and Northern Immigration Pilot Program is a great opportunity for communities to apply to it and really demonstrate how their community can welcome newcomers, and we can build the lessons learned based on that. So to be eligible, you must be located in Western Canada, Ontario, or one of the 3 territories. You have to demonstrate a community readiness for newcomers. You have to have a population of 50,000 or less and be located at least 75 kilometers from a census metropolitan area. Or you can have up to 200,000 people and be considered remote from other larger cities based on Statistics Canada measurement of remoteness. Thank you all for listening to me today. I went through that pretty quickly just because the other presenters did cover a lot of the information. We have lunch coming up soon. But I'm willing to take any questions that you may have for me.
Here we go, get some more questions here going on.
Thank you. Christina, that was a great presentation. We need a PA guy here. Yeah. My ears are still ringing. So, Christina, I was really struck by that. Those two graphs you showed the education levels and the income. Did you do a further breakdown into the jobs? Like you were sort of talking about, for example, you thought maybe more these well-paying construction jobs, for example, that led to those people who had lower levels of education but higher levels of income in the Northwest and the Northeast compared to Toronto. I don't know if you did any more digging to find out why they were the way they were.
Yeah, so that's a very good point, and that is definitely something that needs to be done. Unfortunately, I didn't have the time or the tools to do that, but it does need to be further investigated to know exactly what jobs are leading to these, exactly what programs in the education sector are leading to these jobs, which are then leading to these high income brackets. Yeah.
So that would be better, because it might be a bit misleading if, say, you're a healthcare professional and you come here thinking you can earn more money, but all those could job work because you do construction work, so you know, to manage that expectation, right?
Sure, but the graph is divided between university education versus non-university, and I think to be in the healthcare sector, I mean, I could be totally wrong, but you must be minimum university level education, so, I mean, I don't...
Well, that's a bad example. I guess it would be if I'm a non-university educated person thinking I can come here and maybe earn a lot of money. That might be if I'm in a certain sector of the economy, right?
Absolutely, yeah. So more research needs to be done to dive into those sectors, but the opportunity is there for sure.
Yeah.
So if it is construction workers, then maybe go and market that to those people taking that in school, or maybe those people that are working at a job in the GTA who potentially earn more money in Northern Ontario. There's different strategies, of course, but yeah.
Did you find, I know you touched on we have great outdoor stuff in the north, but that's not enough. Did you find there's people asking for more, like they want art galleries, museums, and like indoor stuff to do in your Sault Ste. Marie's and your something like cultural diversity? Or if you hate the cold and can't ski, how do I entertain myself on a Sunday afternoon in North Bay?
Well, no, I unfortunately didn't have the time to delve deeper into that, but I mean, that is definitely something that the community leaders could definitely take on and find out exactly what every community is, just because every community will be different.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Christina. That was amazing. The amount of information is just mind-boggling. That's so good to be able to hear it all put together here today in this particular forum. So our next researcher is Isabelle Schwinner-Luan. Is that correct? Okay. And she holds a bachelor's degree in public ethics from St. Paul's University and a master's degree in interdisciplinary sciences from Laurentian University, and has been working at the CR for 4 years. I can't pronounce all that. As a research coordinator, she also teaches courses at the University of Amherst and is involved in a lot of committees and initiatives with the goal of improving and building her community's capacity. And she's going to speak with you today as well.
everyone. My name is Isabelle Chouinard-Roy, and I'm here with my colleague Anthony Miron. We are research coordinators at the CRIDEC. So it is a Centre Régional de Recherche et d'Intervention en Développement Économique et Communautaire. It is a research center affiliated with First University, Université de Hearst. So some of you may know us. We came here last June to hold a few consultations. We've been working on a project which is the Provincial Strategic Plan for the 3 Francophone immigration networks, so the 3 RIFs. Paula and Christian, some of you guys may know. We did work in partnership with Les Sentiers du Leadership. They are a firm based in Ottawa, Lise Lortie and André Lalonde. So we are here today to just present the planning process and the strategic plan for Francophone immigration. So a bit of context, if you want to think. So I think it skipped one. Yeah. Yes. So the project was for the 3 Francophone immigration networks, like I said, and it was the strategic planning process for 2018 to 2023. And the objective was to gain a better overview of Francophone immigration in Ontario, a perspective that would allow for a provincial overview, provincial actions. So the 3 RIFs decided to have a strategic plan together in order to better coordinate their action at the provincial level and also the regional level. So the plan has 3 levels, which we're going to go through today. The provincial level, the regional level, and the local level.
Okay, so hi everyone, bonjour tout le monde. Donc, I'll speak a little bit about our mandate. So first, the first step was to prepare a global portrait of what was happening in immigration in each of the 3 regions. So with the 3 RIFs, we did that. Also, we led a province-wide round of consultation. So I think we did about 12 or 15. Zeda's going to speak a little bit about this in the next slide. And then we developed the first draft of the provincial plan. So we started with the provincial plan, and then we went more precisely in each of the regions with operational plans. And finally, we did integrate a developmental evaluation strategy into the strategic plan.
So the provincial tour, over 235 persons were consulted overall, and about 50 newcomer or persons that went through the Francophone immigration process. So you have the regions where we went and the number of people that were consulted in those regions. For Northern Ontario, we held 2 consultations in Thunder Bay, one with partners, so the RIFs partners, and one with newcomers. We also did Sudbury and Timmins in Northern Ontario.
We'll talk a little bit about the provincial strategic plan. So the plan itself has 4 main components. So the first one is 5 strategic focuses that are from the RIF's mandate, and then 15 overall intended results that are covered by all the RIFs in Canada. And then from those intended results, there are 7 common strategies that can be deployed in collaboration with all levels. So that's government, provincial, regional, and local community partners. And finally, from those strategies, we identified some targeted actions in the plan.
So a bit about the 7 common strategies, like Anthony said, those are at the provincial level, but they can be deployed with partners at all levels, so either provincial, regional, or local partners. So the first one is to enhance the continuum of services to serve more immigrants in more Francophone communities. At the provincial level, coordinate the regionalization of Francophone immigration to rural areas and small Francophone communities, as well as to Northern Ontario. Coordinate efforts to establish a Francophone capacity in the 3 major regions of Ontario, equivalent to the Resettlement Assistance Program.
Number 4, so again, those are the common strategies that can be deployed at all levels, so with everybody. Number 4, work with colleges and economic organizations to support and accelerate the economic independence of immigrants who want to settle in Ontario's Francophone communities. Number 5, collaborate with Ontario's Francophone community and organizations and institutions to support and facilitate the social, cultural, and community integration of immigrants, again, who want to settle in Francophone communities in Ontario.
And the last 2, coordinate and stimulate the promotion of Francophone communities abroad in order to recruit more immigrants from diverse pools of Francophone populations who want to settle in Ontario's Francophone communities, and strengthen the leadership of the 3 Francophone immigration networks and their partners in consultation, engagement, awareness, support, and coordination in Francophone immigration.
So next up from the 7 common strategies, we identified some targeted actions. The first one, those are not all the actions, but there are some of them. Make a harmonized international recruitment campaign. Establish a provincial council of Francophone settlement services providers. Create a circle of collaboration in economic integration. So a lot of them touch the collaboration and working together. Implement the Francophone Welcoming Communities Initiative, and finally, develop targeted strategies to meet the needs of the vulnerable immigration population.
So that was a brief overview of the Provincial Strategic Plan. Now we're going to go into the Regional Operation Plan for 2018-2021 for Northern Ontario's RIPS, so that is specific to Christian, Paula, and their team. We did do surveys, we did consultations, but we also did surveys, online surveys with partners and newcomers, and the RIPS have overall 8 mandates, but these were the ones that the partners and newcomers thought that they should make a priority in Northern Ontario. So there were 3. Raise awareness, mobilize, and adequately support Francophone communities so they become more welcoming, more dynamic, and more inclusive. Adopt and implement concrete actions to meet the needs of immigrants and the communities, and promote, track, and document progress in regards to the implementation of promotion, welcoming, settlement, and integration services in underdeveloped regions in their territory.
So from the surveys that we talked about, we did some graphs, so they're not as good looking as the one that Christina presented us, but still. So the main challenges identified by the newcomers in Northern Ontario, so that means Northeast and Northwest combined, were the labor market integration and the recognition of past work experiences. So it's written a bit small, but the other big challenges identified were the access to healthcare services, culture shock, knowledge of the laws, and also recognition of qualifications, so in the education.
In the surveys, we also asked this question. This is specific to Northern Ontario. So we asked them, have you ever used the services of an Anglophone organization or an organization that only offers services in English? 50% mentioned yes and 50% mentioned no in Northern Ontario. And some of the reasons mentioned were they are more numerous and accessible, so services in English. I did not know any French services because it was the only option, or to learn the language, so to learn English.
So from the consultations, we identified some priorities in the Northeast and the Northwest. So I think we have to go back, continue. Yes, this one. So the priorities in the Northwest, first regionalization towards northern communities, and then promotion of services, so mostly the improvement of settlement services and ensuring the active offer of French language services, retention of newcomers, and collaboration between the organizations. And then for the Northeast,
Northeast is pretty similar, regionalization towards northern communities, economic integration of newcomers, so recognition of credentials, second language courses, and also just to educate on racial discrimination, retention of newcomers, and collaboration between the organizations.
and so those were the priorities identified. So now I'm going to talk a little bit about the regional issues in Northern Ontario, so Northeast and Northwest combined. So based on what we heard during the consultations, those were the main issues for the Northern region. So the need to substantially increase the number of Francophone and Francophone immigrants settling in Northern Francophone communities. The need to focus on communities that are predisposed to take charge of attracting, welcoming, integrating, and including more Francophone immigrants. Third one is the need to highlight the assets and attraction of Francophone communities in the North. Number four is a need for closer links between local committees and Francophone settlement service providers. And finally, the need to work closely with the local immigration partnerships.
Now we talked about the regional aspect of the plan, which was for the Northwest and Northern Ontario in general. Now we're going to go a little bit more specific for the local communities or the local actions in Thunder Bay. So what was said during the consultations and put together with the provincial and regional level. So we just wanted to present that because those were some of the comments or general comments following Thunder Bay's consultation, and it is actually the only place we heard those comments, and we thought it'd be interesting to show that to you guys and keep that in mind for the next few days. So Francophone partners enjoyed working with Anglophone partners and vice versa. That was during the consultation. We had a lot of Anglophone partners that were present, so that was great. Anglophone partners and employers are interested in working on Francophone immigration, so we felt that in Thunder Bay, the interest to work with Anglophone partners to better the Francophone immigration strategy at the local level and the regional level was really good compared to other communities that we visited. And not sure how to pronounce that word with my French accent, but a simultaneous translation was well appreciated by all.
And then to conclude, so a few possible local actions that we identified during the plan with the help of people here in Thunder Bay. So designate a Francophone organization for settlement services. So that's for the Thunder Bay local committee. Develop a bilingual welcome kit with all existing services. Third one, include the Northwest in their regional recruitment strategy. So often when people think about Northern Ontario, they think about Sudbury, attendance curves, campus casing, but sometimes people forget about the Northwest, and we think that's a mistake.
And work with the municipality to promote the francophonie. Christina touched on the next one. Establish a connector program to educate employers about cultural diversity. Encourage joint projects of sharing of financial and human resources between organizations. So that goes in two ways. It can go to offer jobs to immigrants or newcomers. So if two organizations have a part-time job, they can come together and then make a full-time job. Or it also works if some projects need to be done and 2 or 3 organizations can put their financial resources together and make the project happen. And involve the municipality in initiatives related to immigration. That's it for the strategic plan. We went really fast, but it's pretty long. I'm not sure exactly how many pages, but that was a brief overview just to include the Francophone component today and tomorrow. So any questions for us?
Any questions at all?
I think everyone's hungry.
I think everyone's hungry too. Okay, well, thank you very much, Isabel and Anthony, for coming and for sharing. And they drove from Hearst, they left, and how many hours later? 30 some odd hours later, they arrived. So thank you so much for your effort and your time. And now, just before we go to lunch, a couple of things. I want to ask you all to join me in thanking Lisa Lacko for all of her wonderful contributions today and for joining us. It was truly wonderful to have you. And we have a small gift for you. So thank you, Lisa. I don't know if you wanted to say anything else before you go.
The only thing I can say is that I'm very excited about the future of Northern Ontario, because this is something I've had conversations with many people about over the years in different capacities, and to see it all in one room is wonderful. Well done, Stacey.
It's everybody in the room that pulled it together. So thank you so much, Lisa. Really, really appreciate you coming and sharing your time. So one other announcement before we break for lunch.
Hi everybody, my name is Jennifer Hay. I'm the Immigration Advisor over at Lakehead University, and we have Dana Trush. I'm the International Student Advisor for Confederation College. So we do all the immigration advising with all the international students in Thunder Bay, and we can say probably more than 50% of them would like to stay here. So we'd like to invite you guys to join us after the forum ends today at 5 p.m., or sorry, 4:15, to join us in the Galileo room. We have arranged for some students from both Lakehead and Confed to come here and have a little mix and mingle, and you can chat with them to learn about what they like about Thunder Bay, what kind of struggles or challenges they're having, or what they're looking to see in the future. Thank you. Thank you.
Okay, so we are going to have lunch. There's lunch here. And let me just double check on my timeline. Yes. So we will reconvene at 2 o'clock for the breakout session. So the breakout sessions, basically what we're going to do is you can self-identify. We're going to have 3 different groups in here, and then we're going to have a Francophone group in the trade room, which is the room beside the office in the hallway. And basically those are going to be facilitated, and we have note takers. So what we're going to do is we're going to have people that identify as employers in one group, people that identify as service providers in another group, and people that identify as anybody from a municipality, so economic development, any councillors that are in the area, also to be in together in one group in here too. So we'll have 3 different groups in here, and then the Francophones will be in the trade room. So everyone enjoy your lunch. Thank you very much for all of your attention and your input and your questions this morning. We look forward to having some fruitful discussions in our breakout sessions this afternoon. Thank you again to our presenters as well.